We're going to call the Plan Commission meeting to order for Wednesday, May 3rd. Roll call, please.
Goslin,
Here.
Harms, Joseph,
Here.
Lalonde,
Here.
Peterson, and Schneider.
Okay, any changes to be made?
None.
Okay, approval of minutes, March 15, 2017, Plan Commission. Everybody get a chance to review the minutes?
Yes, we do.
Any comments? Otherwise, you need a motion.
I move to accept the minutes of March 15th.
Okay, and I'll second that.
I think we had a Schneider second
Oh,
before.
another second?
A Joseph second.
Okay.
You can be a third. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Design review for 1 Washington Place development. And it's on Washington Avenue, not street. I understand from the article in the paper. I just wanted to say before we got started, this is not a public hearing. We don't have a lot of people in the audience, but we will not be taking testimony. That was done in December, and I think even going into January, we had a follow-up. I also want to say thank you to everybody who's been involved in the process, from city council, staff, my fellow commissioners, Shodine, the architect. It's been a little frustrating and stressful at times. The process has been less than ideal. We're learning. It's some things that we haven't done before, i.e. the appeal. But, we're all passionate about what we do, and everyone is looking out for the best interests of Batavia. So with that said, I'll talk a little bit about the history. We've had several meetings. I talked about the public input meetings. We had made a recommendation to not approve the zoning change. The city council overruled that. So the zoning is in place. We had denied the design review. It was appealed at the last, I forget the date, April 11th, Committee of the Whole got sent back to us tonight. They talked about us working together to come to a solution on the design. In that meeting, some parameters were established. So I'm saying that to the audience, fellow Batavians who are watching tonight, and to our commissioners. The number of units won't change. The height and bulk are pretty much set. We're not to review further parking and traffic concerns. So we have some design updates that were brought to us Friday. They have a beautiful sample assembly, which we appreciate. And then we have options going forward. Those are to approve as presented. We could approve with conditions. We could continue, which is not advised. And we could deny, which in case, I assume it would be appealed back to the city council. So with that said, we're going to start the process. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to say a couple things real quick before we turn it over to them. First off, as a reminder, the Plan Commission, this meeting is televised tonight because of the nature of this project. So we had talked about that some larger projects would be potentially televised. So this is one of those meetings. So just wanted to remind everybody that is on BATV tonight. So, but in addition, just to clarify as to the approval process. The Plan Commission, based on what the city attorney said, is we cannot actually deny the design review. You can approve it with conditions, and you can put, whatever conditions you want on that. If you wanted to change it into a grass hut or something like that, I mean, that's, something you could do, but you can't actually deny the design review. So you can approve it with certain conditions, whatever those may be, if you wish to do so. So that's kind of the one limitation to what your ability to make a recommendation on. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Great, thank you, Scott. Okay, any further staff comments before we proceed?
Just very briefly, staff remains supportive of the project per the plans that we will be going through this evening, as well as the materials that we will be going through this evening. Before the commission considers entertaining a motion on the design review itself, as a reminder, you must arrive at findings for approval. Staff has provided draft findings for approval in the memo that the commission may refer to when taking on a motion to approve findings.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, Mr. Petzold, do you want to make a presentation?
Sure. Good evening. For the record, my name is David Patzelt, 77 North First Street, Geneva, Illinois, 60134. In advance of the meeting, we had received a note that the chairman had circulated, I believe, amongst several of the Plan Commission members, and there may have been some edits to it by the various Plan Commission members. I'm not certain of that, but so in your packets, we have provided you a great more detail, and many of those sheets respond, or drawings respond to many of those comments. We didn't have enough wall space or easels or boards to present every plan, so my thought is to have Don McKay from Nagel Hartray, the architect, verbally walk through some of the responses to those, and as he goes through those verbally, if there is a question about one of those specific elements, if somebody would just interrupt Don and say, could you refer us to a sheet, then we'll go to that sheet, and hopefully that if we don't all have the packets, we can direct you to a particular sheet. Some of the items he's certainly going to be able to refer to the boards that are in front of you, or the plan that's up on the wall, and or the sample panels. So trying to cover all of the items that we changed, but some of them are just going to be, I'll say, almost a rapid fire, where it's just a narrative as to what we did on the plan. And again, if you have a question, please interrupt us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Don McKay to walk through those changes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Don McKay. I'm a principal at Nagel Hartray Architecture. Our firm is located in Chicago. I happen to live in Oak Park, Illinois. And the drawings that Dave was referring to is a packet of about 15 to 20 drawings that were submitted responding to requests we had from the Plan Commission for some additional information. So I'm going to go through the comments as Dave indicated. I'll run through them in terms of kind of groups of drawings. So I'm going to start with the floor plans. I'll also talk about the architectural site plan, the exterior elevations, and finally the landscape plan. So beginning with the floor plans, the retail storefronts have been added. They are now indicated on the floor plans.
Excuse me a second, Mr.
Yeah,
McKay. Sorry to
yes.
interrupt you, but can they be put on the screen? Great.
Sure.
So while you're talking about it, hopefully we can
Okay.
follow along.
So the plans that are on the screen right now are at a very small scale. It's probably going to be hard to follow what I'm talking about. And then the plans that follow are at a larger scale that show a lot more detail. And so it take quite some time to go through and kind of pick up everything. So I'm happy to do that, but maybe the better thing to do is just kind of go through the list of things that we have, and then if there are certain things that you have questions about or concerns about, we can focus on those. So we were asked to add the retail storefronts on the floor plans, which we have done. That's primarily along the Wilson Street elevation and the River Street elevation. On the lower garage plan, we have updated the northwest corner so that it corresponds to the angled corner that's shown above it. On the upper garage floor plan, the exterior doors at the northeast and southeast exit stairs have been added to correspond to the elevations. The exterior door at the southeast exit stair was removed from the lower garage floor plan in order to coordinate with the grades that are on the site This door has been moved elsewhere on the upper garage floor plan, as I just indicated. The exterior windows and the clear openings have been added to the garage floor plans to coordinate with the elevations. So all the openings that were shown at the garage on the elevations are now also shown on the garage floor plans. The two-bedroom units at residential entries have been updated to indicate projecting bedrooms above covered doors on the first floor. The one and two-bedroom units at the south side of the north-south bar have been relocated to coordinate balcony placement with the bend in the building face. So some of these were issues where the floor plan kind of showed one thing and the elevation showed another thing, and so we've cleaned all that up to make sure that those things correspond now. A roof plan, which had been missing from the previous submittals, has been included in the submittal that you have right now. That's kind of a quick summary of the floor plans. Maybe before I move on to the next set of drawings, I could answer any questions that you may have regarding the floor plans themselves.
Yeah, I noticed the updates, especially at the southeast corner, that are now more consistent with the tower.
Right.
And the uniqueness of what that does to the units at that location.
Right.
I hadn't noticed the stair that you were talking about, the door that exited, I think you said on the southwest side, is that on the Wilson?
Southeast, northeast, so on the upper garage floor plan, let me flip to it. The upper garage floor plan, the northeast and southeast exits,
Northeast and southeast.
correct.
Yeah, those are both shown. I thought you said one was eliminated though because it didn't work with grade.
Yes, there was an exterior, on the lower garage plan,
Right.
there was a door at the southeast exit stair that was removed from the lower garage floor plan.
Oh, okay, so it's coming out the
Correct.
upper floor.
That's correct, yep. It was just shown on the wrong floor plan,
Right.
basically, yep.
And that ties into the tower, so that's the exit for the residents also?
It is, yes, yeah. It's an exit stair that goes all the way up through the building.
Okay, any other questions on the floor plans? Great, thank you.
Okay, on the architectural site plan, and I'm distinguishing that from the landscape plan, so on the architectural site plan, which I think is the first drawing that you had.
G001?
Yes, exactly. Additional landscape information is actually shown on the landscape plans, and I'll get to those in a minute. But on the architectural site plan, the building footprint has been updated so that it corresponds now to all of the unit plans that are shown on the floor plans above. The kind of, we have a couple of kind of hinge pieces in the building. It's very subtle. You can kind of see it on the plans there. I don't know if there's a pointer I can use to, thank you. So there are a couple of places in the plan where the building jogs a little bit. It's shown two places right here. I think that's a clarification to the plans that wasn't, it's kind of a subtlety and a clarification that's been made to the plans that I think was not reflected in the plans before. That was kind of a function of working out the interior unit plans and that coordination between the balconies and the unit plans on that side of the building as well.
And
Yep,
the
sorry?
difference of the two streets, Wilson and State, are not parallel.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah, there's barely anything in this building that's parallel with anything else, so. The footprint of the building itself has been updated to reflect the exterior grade. The balconies above are shown dashed where applicable. So again, it's a little hard to see on this plan, but where the balconies are located, so you can read it on this site plan, there's little dashed boxes that kind of stick out from the face. You can see on the actual plan. That gives you an idea if you're walking down the street where the balcony is located relative to the site plan that you see here.
And they're well back from the property line,
They are, yes.
because I see it's recessed there. and I apologize because I forgot to bring my magnifying glass.
Yeah, no, it's
But
hard
the
to read these
dimension
small.
to the southwest corner from the property line looks like it's maybe 6 feet or,
Oh, man, my eyes are not
Okay.
that good either.
6'3".
But I would say, yeah,
6'3".
I can read the dimension next to it, which is 12'7". It looks like it's roughly half that dimension.
Okay.
Okay, and on this site plan, we have also indicated with arrows where the entry points are into the retail space. And here we have one bit of coordination that was not picked up. These two first arrows that are here, we do not actually have doors into the retail space there. Our first door into the retail space along Wilson is located right here, and then we have these other four along this facade here. That's a stair door there. We have these other two retail doors that are located mid-block there as well. And that should correspond to the elevation drawings that we have. And the reason that we don't have retail doors down further west along this facade is because of the way grade slopes off here relative to the floor plane that we have inside the building there. So it would require steps or, something that would make for inaccessible entries into those spaces there.
Although it's possible to put one in as long as you have an accessible entry.
Yeah,
Could be a secondary access.
that's true, that's
If
true.
needed,
And
right.
we've looked at some other ways of raising a portion of the sidewalk outside here in order to get entries that align with the floor elevation and are accessible. Imagine, this is the high point of the site over here. If you were to kind of get on a walk, so to speak, and that was level down to here, but when you got down to here, there was a drop-off in grade, next to the public sidewalk. The trick with that is, if it's high enough, we've got to put a guardrail on it. Now you're separating the retail space from the public sidewalk. You really want to make that feel, very accessible. So the judgment we've made on it right now is to leave the walk relatively flat along here and just place our first retail entrance down here.
It looks like you have room, though, if somewhere down the road you wanted to subdivide that space and add another retail space, you could add that walk.
We could, and I think by virtue of the fact, here's our property line,
Right.
here's our curb line, so that's the public walkway there. So our building is set back from the building sufficiently to allow for that kind of addition in the future, yes. Okay, those are the changes that were made to the architectural site plan. Before I move on, are there any questions regarding that?
Can you tell me about the curb and the street? It looks like the street is right up against the curb. Is that correct? Or is there grass or some kind of landscaping between the sidewalk and the street on Wilson?
The landscape, you're talking about like a parkway, if you will,
Right,
between the
right.
curb. So right now, it's shown pretty much as it exists out there right now. We're not changing that.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said, right now, we're leaving it, we're proposing to leave it as it is out there right now.
Okay, but can you tell me how much distance there is between the sidewalk and the,
And the property line?
Yes.
Sidewalk and the property line is about, let me see the dimension here. About 7 feet, 7, 8 feet.
okay, from the sidewalk to the property line and then the curb, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And there's no landscaping proposed along there?
The landscaping is shown on the landscape drawing,
There's some,
Yeah,
Well, there is on the east end.
yes.
Okay.
yeah, there's trees and.
existing trees right now. Yeah.
Right. So this drawing actually gives you a pretty good idea of where the property line is, probably a little bit clearer, easier to understand. Here's our property line.
Oh, okay.
So what we were talking about earlier, so here's a planting bed between the building and the property line here. This is really the public sidewalk area out here. So what we were talking about earlier is that if we wanted to extend this sidewalk at a level elevation down towards the west end of the building, we could get, say, a little wall there that allows you to get a flat walk up here and get more doors into the retail up here. Our concern is that that little wall with a guardrail on top of it especially starts to act as kind of a barrier between the public area and the retail space there.
Again, you could do that and have a stair on the west end of that.
That's exactly what we looked at. That's exactly what we looked at.
Able-bodied people could use the stair, but if you had someone who needed accessibility, they could use the.
That's right, that's right. So I think as far as meeting the accessibility requirements, it can easily be done. I think this is more a judgment about what's best for the life of the retail space there, what's going to make it most desirable.
So Don, if I may, the elevations for the southern face, based on the revisions to the drawing, the door that's over the one that says boutique and cafe, those actually wouldn't be doors based on that right now, at least.
Let me check the elevation.
Yeah, on
Is there a drawing you can refer to there?
A2, the elevation drawings.
Okay, so you're looking at the rendering.
Yes,
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm looking at
I know I'm going back and forth.
at the other drawings. They should be the same. Yes, so you're talking about this elevation here.
Yes, so the one,
So this door and this door will not be there.
be there for now, at
Right.
least, right.
So one of the things that we're in the process of coordinating with our civil engineer is this slope along here. So what's shown on this elevation here right now kind of maximizes our ability to get the doors to the retail to align with our sidewalk. Unfortunately, this doesn't work very well with the existing curb elevation that's out there. So the street elevation, you can see how this kind of slopes up, it's flatter, you get a flat area here, it slopes up again. In fact, the street elevation is more or less a constant slope from one corner to the other, okay? And so if we do something like this, we're gonna get more than a 2% cross slope between the curb and the face of the building, which is not gonna work for accessibility. So that's why we're in the process of working this out with the civil engineer. We want to leave the existing curb where it is. We don't want to mess with that. And then we also want to make sure that we have a positive slope from the building, away from the building towards the gutter. But it can't be more than 2%, otherwise it doesn't work for accessibility requirements. So by the time we factor all that in, that's why we end up losing these two doors that are shown here right now. The only way we could keep them would be to drop the retail floor down quite a bit more than what's shown here right now. And one of the results of that, we're balancing this against the bedrock elevations that we have underneath. And so, trying to push the building further down in the bedrock becomes a challenge as well. So that's why that accounts for the elimination of these two doors. And this is something we've just been working through with the civil engineer, this kind of detail in the last few days here.
Thanks.
One of the other factors we're trying to accommodate, we learned just last week that there have been some electrical vaults installed in the alleyway back here. And so there's a fixed, this is what really kind of led to this whole study. That kind of set a certain elevation back there that we have to meet, which set a certain elevation at the building corner here that we have to meet, which kind of took away some of the flexibility for, manipulating the grade along that side, so. Okay. Move on to the exterior elevations.
Are you going to come back to the landscape plan later?
Yeah, the landscape plan is the last thing on my list. Or I can jump to it now if you want, doesn't really matter.
Well, we were looking at it. That's
Okay.
the reason I thought it might be good to address
Sure.
it at the same time.
Sure.
I think it's the second sheet in our packet, which makes it easy for us. L1, yeah.
Okay, so there are two landscape architects who are working on this. One is a landscape architect retained by the city to work on the piece between the Wilson Street out here and the garage door that we have back here that gets you into the accessible entry. And then the other landscape architect is responsible for everything else that you see on the plan. So part of what we've done since the last submittal is coordinate between those two and make sure that we've got a plan that reflects both designs. The courtyard landscaping has been updated to incorporate the first floor residential patio. So this was a question you can see in the plans right now. These little boxes that are shown here indicate where the first floor patios are on the, in those courtyards. That's something that was not shown before. Pedestrian lights have been updated at the plaza entry on Washington Street. There are a couple of lights that are shown out here. So there's one here, and the intention here is that these lights cast light on the sidewalk, but also on the stair and kind of focus on the entry piece coming into the building here. Okay, the parkway tree and planter placement has been revised on Wilson Street. And I am not sure exactly what this refers to. Dave, I don't know if you have an idea.
I think some of those trees are identified as existing.
These here,
Interesting, those three.
yeah, yep. The existing conditions that are out there. Okay, thank you. And then finally, as we've updated the building footprint to reflect changes that we've made in the unit plans in coordination with the elevations, we've given that plan to our landscape architect, who has now shown it on this drawing that you see here, so that there's a coordinated floor plan and landscape plan. Tom, did you have a question?
Not particularly. You have, I'll call them just circles on the property line along Wilson. It says planters. Are those raised planters? Those things, yeah.
These things here.
There's like 4 or 5 of them along there.
So I think that these are site elements that they should be documented in here. Let me see if I can find a picture of them.
Oh, okay. It's probably on L2 in the lower left corner.
Exactly.
All right, so they are raised.
Yes.
Okay,
There, on the bottom.
yeah.
Those are meant to reflect the existing streetscape that we have along River Street with the
okay.
planters, similar.
Right.
Good,
Okay.
yep.
I just have a question. In our guidelines that we referred to, the design guidelines
Okay.
at the Plan Commission, on open space and common areas, it does say that 30% of the site area of any multifamily development should be common open space, exclusive of any parking or drive areas. Is this the only open space, and is it 30%?
When you say the only open space, you're talking about this area here?
No, I'm talking about the courtyards.
The courtyards. I don't know whether that represents 30% of the plan. Looking at it, I would guess that it is, but I think it's easy enough to run a calculation on
Okay.
that and confirm it.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
And that's to accommodate all 186 apartments for.
That's right. And, this is not like a gated community. I mean, the fact is that this courtyard is open to anybody who might want to go up there, so.
Including non-residents?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, non-residents could go up there,
Yeah, it's open to the public.
yeah,
Oh, the courtyards are?
yes.
Yeah, there's stairs.
There's no gates or anything.
on Washington.
Access.
Okay.
Yep. And then you have the pool deck,
And the pool deck is on the back
which is
side here.
obviously residents only, but
Yes, yes,
it's still outdoor space.
yes.
And then it also says picnic grills and tables and benches are to be provided in open spaces. Will that be an option for the residents?
They're showing, if you go to that, Drew, if you could go to the, there, it's the, yes. So if you can zoom into that, here.
Okay.
So there's the, you can see the tables, and I think this lower left corner, Drew, that note, does it say grills?
Oh, they're over here.
Yes, fireplace with, and,
Okay, that's in.
yes, grills.
I'm sorry, and where is that, Dave?
So this is on River, this is River Street.
Oh, okay.
It is on the, it's
By
on
the
the.
pool,
The
by the
pool
pool,
deck,
okay,
exactly. So,
okay.
but again, this is, as Don indicated, and Tom did, that this is a private space for the residents
Right.
only.
Right.
But it is outdoor, it's outdoor space.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding the landscape plan?
There was one other thing I had, again, from the guidelines. If there were to be children expected to reside, tot lots and playgrounds should be provided. Nothing, we didn't think about children, right? I mean. There are no tot lots. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Isn't that part of the zoning ordinance?
I will address that. What Commissioner Peterson is reading from are guidelines. They're not codified. They're not part of the zoning code. There are multiple family residential districts in the zoning code that have specific open space requirements, but this is not one of those districts. The downtown mixed use is not one of those districts, so there are no minimums required.
Okay. Yeah, I realize they're guidelines. I just know they were brought up at the committee of the whole, that we need to pay more attention to those. Thank you.
You mentioned two landscape architects, and the city is working with, it looks like, Lannert?
Chris Lannert, yes.
Yeah. He's got like some kind of a, meandering walk or something shown there. I'm trying to understand what that even is.
I can address that since we hired the consultant. Essentially, we have what's the existing call alleyway. It's not legally an alley, but we'll call it that just for description purposes. That goes behind where it goes to the west of where the dentist office used to be and east of the yoga studio building. And so that goes along the western edge of this building. Right now, it is a driveway. What we're proposing to do is remove the driveway and replace it with a pedestrian sidewalk and landscape area. Our landscape architect we've hired is designing that to create a pathway that provides access to the garage itself from Wilson Street, but also provides access to the dumpster enclosure that would be used for some of the property owners along River Street as a unified garbage access point. So that's part of that design, is a sidewalk essentially meandering on purpose, but then would also have some additional landscape areas. That has not been finalized yet. That's still kind of a work in progress, but that's the idea behind that.
And so from that perspective, it's really not part of the review tonight.
I mean, it's kind of a work in progress because some of it's going to depend on some of the negotiations we have with the adjacent property owners also. So that is something we're still working on. So yes, you could say that is excluded from this.
It seems like,
Go ahead.
seems like those trees are awfully large to be part of that space. That's on the plan right now.
Well, we can talk about that, because I'm interested to know what's going on back there, beyond what Lannert's doing.
Up to where, if I can add, up to where Lannert from Wilson Street to that garbage dumpster area access door, that I believe is intended to be all hardscape with the potted plants on it. So I believe that circuitous path that you're seeing is really a brick pattern on a larger brick patterned area.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want you to interpret it as any type of a fescue grass or a plantings or anything that are in between that circuitous path.
Yeah, or too narrow a path.
Exactly, yes.
I was a little
And
concerned about that.
And one of the challenges we have in there is that, it's a relatively shady spot. So we have to really carefully think about what kind of plantings we're going to have in there because,
Right.
there isn't a lot of sun in there anyway, so.
So going past that point, our plan, which are in color, shows it almost all green, which suggests to me it's all planted or it's intended to be grass. Is there no hardscape beyond that point to get further back into that alleyway between the buildings?
The only, it is intended to be a green planted material. The only area where there may be some hardscape is potentially, and it's not, has not been confirmed yet, but to have a sidewalk from the garage entry and dumpster area, a sidewalk to access potentially O'Brien's backyard beer garden. But again, that has not been solidified with the O'Briens and what their plans are and for the backyard
But
space.
it's something you're amenable to.
Yes, yes. Well, until that's decided, it will remain as green space, green planted materials.
And then further north, between their property and what I'll call the south face of the
Pool
deck pool area, you show green space there, but I know there's a pretty significant grade change along there. Is that pretty much at the same elevation as their current retaining wall?
You made, the retaining wall will be higher than grade, but if you think of their steps, that they have somewhat steps, landing, steps, landing, steps, so that, think of that as a uniform slope, if you would, rather than steps on the, what would be the north side of their retaining wall. Their retaining wall will remain. Everything north of that retaining wall will be planted. It's not intended to be a public accessible space.
Right, but it's not like significantly at a different elevation so that it's like a pit between the walls.
I envision that the retaining wall will almost be the height of called a handrail. So the retaining wall will be sticking above grade
So so
on both sides, both left and
Right.
right sides of the retaining wall as you go up that stairway. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Okay.
And then in the courtyards, you have some trellis work shown there?
Portico.
Yes.
Can you guys just describe in a little more detail what's going on there?
It's intended to be a wood trellised structure, and we're just checking to see if there was a detail provided of it, but it's not a roofed structure. It would be an open roofed, but perhaps, a shade area. In comparison to the pool deck structure is truly a roofed, but no sidewall structure where the grills are at. Yeah, heavy timber, cedar structure,
Natural cedar?
natural cedar, yeah.
And are there benches out there?
There should be, but I'm not
Oh,
seeing,
there's a
trellis
note
with
that says
benches.
benches and
Yeah.
tables, so
Okay.
Table.
it doesn't define it specifically.
And one area that it says, again, in the guidelines, seasonal plantings as well, in that, I imagine in the open spaces, they said could be provided, so there might be some seasonal flowers, bulbs planted in that area?
I would expect that as well as decorations for the residents, different seasonal,
As shrubs,
exactly.
okay.
I'm not the plant expert. Any other commissioners want to comment on the plant selection?
I just,
Yeah, the only problem I had was what I mentioned in that walkway. But if the city's landscapers are going to look into that.
Yes,
right?
that will be our responsibility, and
Okay,
that actually may extend, as Mr. Patzelt said, that actually may extend further north, providing additional access, so some of that may be altered as we, continue with negotiations. So,
okay. All right, will we get to see that plan, or?
we can provide that to you, sure.
Okay, all right, good.
And then there are plantings shown along the Washington Avenue streetscape up against the wall,
Yes,
which is nice because it's going to soften that a little bit,
Yes.
and especially where it meets the courtyard and you have that kind of 7-foot stone
Right.
wall, won't be quite as harsh. There was mention that, was this drop-off lane extended at some point based on
The fire
city or
depart-
fire department review? Is that still something that's going to happen, or is this now reflecting?
it was the easement, I think.
That is currently is currently under review by IDOT.
Okay.
And IDOT has it in their hands. They have not responded back to that, the size of it, or whether it's even possible yet.
Oh, okay. But if it happened, it would lengthen this, so we'd lose a little more potential streetscape planting,
Possibly,
and we have no control over that.
right. Yeah, because it's kind of governed by the length of the drop zone plus what the fire department wants for a fire lane also. So it's kind of a combined drop-off lane essentially, so, but, you know, ultimately, IDOT controls that, so we're at the mercy of IDOT as to what they're gonna allow or not allow.
And then you have 2 staircases and a ramp. I assume the ramp is required for ADA purposes?
That's correct.
Because it seems kind of,
It's a long ramp.
yeah, it's a long ways, and quite frankly, you could go in the garage and take an elevator, but I guess maybe they can't access the lobby.
Yeah, the idea is to
Will this
make
be
the
for the
building
public?
universally accessible, so,
Yeah.
Okay.
they can go in the front door just like everybody else can go in the front door, so.
And then you do have another walk at the upper level that would connect the 2 courtyards.
That's right, they can get around, right.
Okay. And then all of the street facade furnishings parallel what we're using in the other areas of the downtown?
Yes.
I know the lighting, we've got, any number of different light fixtures downtown, but these are the historic fixtures that are in this area. And then the other furnishings match what we have there now?
Yes, these, the specifications were taken from your streetscape plans for River Street, and I don't know the name of that project, but that's where we obtained the details from, and photographs were taken of the actual furniture that's out there now.
I saw that you identified asphalt pavers at the garage, on the sidewalk at the garage door entrances. Is that what the city is using, asphalt pavers in sidewalks?
The crossings, the pedestrian crossings are basically a type of stamped asphalt.
Yeah.
is
Okay.
essentially what- It's not exactly that, it's basically, we shave down the asphalt and put this epoxy down and stamp this epoxy, so it looks like brick.
That would be the
That-
crosswalks at the streets.
Right.
Is that the same thing you'd use at the driveway entrances?
We're having a tough time reading the note. Drew, can you,
Is it on the sheet or are we going?
no, on that sheet just below,
It says
Oh, it says
decorative.
stamped asphalt.
Yeah,
It's a stamped as.
yeah, so I would presume they would probably use the same process we've used for our crossings then, so.
Okay. Does that seem appropriate there
Decorative,
for the staff?
decorative crosswalk.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really just to identify to pedestrians who are walking
we were
along
trying,
the street
what
that
the
there's-
intent was is similar to the stamped asphalt that you have perhaps down at State and River.
Right.
When a motorist is coming to that crosswalk, it's somewhat enhanced or pronounced that there could be pedestrians crossing. Similar to here, this is a public garage, the driveway going in, trying to, again, enhance or highlight that pedestrian crossway.
Right. So someone walking along there knows something's going on.
And somebody pulling in or out of the
Okay.
garage knows that or is reminded that the pedestrians could be coming left or right.
Speaking about the driveways there, are there going to be stop signs inside of the building so that people do stop before they
Yes.
cross out before they drive out into the sidewalk area?
Yes, and actually, on the second level, which is the driveway to the right, there's a garage door that has to go up. So any car, you have to pull up to it to actuate the garage door opener. So you're going to have to, in essence, come to a stop to
Okay.
allow the door to go up before you proceed. And same thing when you're exiting the building, you'll have to pull up to the door, actuate the door opener, the door will go up. On the lower door, the one on the left, that will not have an overhead door on it, so that would have a stop sign and/or yield sign.
Okay,
And why is that? Why isn't there, I just noticed that you don't have doors on that.
That's the city's preference. The city
Oh,
did not
okay.
want to have garage doors because of the maintenance issues that are associated with them. But based on the developer's need to insulate the building properly at the ground floor level, we have allowed it to be on the top level of the garage. But we did not want to have them on either level, frankly, but, it was a concession as part of the discussion here that we were going to allow them to have it on the top level, but not the bottom level.
Okay. And then some of your images for the furnishings show brick treatment, but I don't see on the plan specifically where that's identified on the landscape plan. So I guess we could ask, is this expected at all light fixtures and all trees, tree grates, and benches?
Yes, it is. If you, back at the, I'm sorry, what are you saying? Back at the lower left corner as an example there where he's pointing, there's a note that refers to replace the pedestrian lights
Okay,
per detail.
so we'll see a similar pattern continue.
Correct.
Yes.
Around this development that exists throughout
consistent
the
with-
balance of the downtown.
That is correct.
Great.
can I go back, oh, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
just saying.
Can I
thank
go
you.
back to that, the handicap ramp in the front, at the stairs?
Yes?
I was noticing, how long it was. And it seems like it would be better to have an exit or entrance at both sides, because somebody with a wheelchair or a walker going up that area, that's a long way.
That, I think you're meeting that.
So, look, just to be clear, the way this ramp works, I'm going to point on this screen here. We need this amount of ramp to get from this elevation up to this elevation. So the
Okay,
way
so-
the ramp works is you slope up here, you hit a landing here, you slope up here again, you hit another landing here, and then you slope up here to get to your final elevation here.
And
So
there's,
if I understand what you're asking is, could we get a landing spot both on this side and on this side?
well, not a landing, but an exit. So, yeah, but if you're saying it's two different levels, the one on the south side and the one on the north
Yes,
side?
yes. So this landing here is at a different elevation than this area up here. It's also at a different elevation than this landing, also at a different elevation than this here. So the rules for a ramp like this is that every 30 feet, you have to put in a landing. So you can't just have a continuous ramp, you have to have kind of rest stops, along the ramp as you go up. And so that's why the landings are in here, and that's one of the reasons that the ramp takes up the length that it does.
So I think what you're asking is the access point to get to either of the entrances of the building, because there is a sidewalk that parallels that ramp.
That's the
so that-
intent. So everybody who wants to use the ramp to get up to this level, whether it's this courtyard or this courtyard, everybody gets on the ramp at the same spot here.
Right.
Everybody gets off the ramp at the same spot, which is here. If you want to go to the north courtyard from this point, there's a walkway here that allows you to get back over to the north courtyard.
Which that person who just came up the handicap ramp with a wheelchair or a walker would have to then go all that way back.
Yes. So also keep in mind, we have handicap parking spaces in the garage with an elevator. So people who might be in a wheelchair who live in the building, my guess is more often than not, they're going to park their car in the garage, use the elevator in the garage to get to their unit.
But what I'm thinking is this courtyard. If people want to go out into the courtyard and they are I mean, that, and say they're dropped off in front, or, you know, they come down from upstairs. I mean, that just seems like that's a long way for someone who has a handicap.
I agree.
And I don't know how many feet that is from the north end to the south end.
This distance here,
Yes.
I would guess that the building itself is about 60, 65 feet. So I'm guessing that's probably, 50 feet plus or minus.
So is that the length of this room? Maybe
You mean
not even.
from this wall? I would say from that wall, you're probably, I'm guessing this column is maybe 30 feet?
So not even the length of this room?
No,
Yeah.
no, I'd say it's maybe to that next column, but I think it's shorter than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not ideal, but it is what it is. You got a 7-foot grade change there, you have to have a ramp, and you have to meet code.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a better option,
There's not, huh?
no.
But again, if they wanted to, they could go into the elevator and access that if they're a resident. If they're just somebody who wants to use the courtyard, then yes, they're gonna have to use that ramp. If
Right,
they're
if
not,
you're a
if they're
member
not
of the
able to use
public
the stairs.
who wants to use the courtyard, if you live in the building and you want to use the courtyard, you just go out the front door and it's at grade for your use, yes.
Okay,
Okay?
well, it's not okay, but I guess, so there's nothing you can do to change it.
No, I think this is really in the spirit of what the ADA guidelines call for, which is to try to treat all people the same way. So that if you have a front entry, that you allow most people to go into, you have to, the civil thing to do, so to speak, is to let people who have accessibility issues get to the same entry and use the same entry. And that's really what the intent here is.
I think the law is there because we're not all the same. That's why we have handicap access.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're saying anything different, yeah.
You, okay,
Part of the challenge with a community like Batavia is that we have a lot of areas that are sloped. I mean, we're not a flat community, and unfortunately, we have to sometimes, understand and accommodate things that are difficult to accommodate that would not be the same in a flat field. So we have to sometimes come up with creative and unique solutions to problems like this, and this happens to be one of those areas where we have to have a unique solution. It's not ideal, certainly, but I would agree that I don't know we have a lot of other choices in the matter if we want to provide access, universal access to the courtyard areas because of the way they are.
and there is no way that the ramp could be moved to the middle, I mean, the up ramp, moved to the middle of that long ramp, so people wouldn't have to go that far around. You know what I'm saying, to make the ramp a little bit shorter?
So if I understand what you're saying is that it'd be better if you, instead of getting off the ramp here, you got off the ramp in the middle?
No, I'm saying to get on the ramp in the middle.
Well, you're getting on the ramp sort of in the middle right now. You're getting on the ramp right here.
You have to
right
go several feet before, then turn around and come back all the way across the front of that.
So we could pull the start of the ramp out closer to the center here, which would then pull this landing spot over this way, okay? But it's still the same length of ramp. We're not shortening the length of ramp that you're actually on.
But that's what I would, that's what I
No,
would
there's
like.
really, the length of the ramp is governed by the change in elevation.
Yeah, I
Because there are,
understand.
yeah, because there are very specific requirements for how much you can slope the ramp.
Okay,
Yeah.
You can only go 1 inch in every foot, so you can
Right.
only go up 1 inch in every foot, you go horizontally, so,
okay.
Or 1 foot and 12, so
Yeah.
1 foot and 12.
if you got 7 foot, you're talking a lot of ramp.
Yes, yes.
It is what it is. All right, thank you. Any other
Okay.
questions on the landscape plan? Otherwise, we need to move on.
No.
We'll have to cover it tonight.
Okay, the last item that I have to go over are the exterior elevations, and I think most of what I'm going to reference are shown in the black and white drawings that were submitted. Some of it were picked up on the colored elevations as well. But the first thing I want to point out is that there was a request that we show the exterior elevations in the courtyard that were not shown before. So we have shown those now. They're in black and white. They're not rendered in color, but I think you can see from looking at them, the character of those is very similar to what we're doing around the rest of the outside of the building. So we've provided all of those elevations now. Hopefully this also helps to clarify some things that might have been confusing in the colored elevations that we had before. For example, back in this corner here, there's a wall back here that actually slopes at an angle. And I think it might actually show better in one of the other elevations. This might be a good example of it here. So for example, this wall here is at an angle. And I think when we showed the previous elevations, because especially on the courtyard side, those walls were so far in the distance, it was hard to read them. And we rendered them in a way, it was kind of a fuzzy way because they were so far in the distance. They're rendered more realistically now in terms of so you can see the windows there, the siding, they're really treated the same as the other units are. This is not being proposed as an open area or as an all-glass curtain wall area or something like that. What we're proposing to do here is really treat that the same way as the other elevations. So I think that was hopefully that these drawings help to clarify that, because I think we talked about that at one of the previous meetings. I'm not sure it was very clear when we talked about it.
Yeah, every inside corner is at a 45-degree angle.
Correct.
Some of them have windows, some of them have balconies.
That's correct. That's correct.
But material-wise, they're treated just
This-
like all the other
The
straight-on
same as
elevations.
everything else. That's right. Yes.
I do like seeing these because I like the way you turned the corner. It looks like you've taken the, what I'll call shingle pattern down pretty far onto the facade on that
Yeah.
elevation.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that color scheme representative of what we see on the Washington Avenue elevation?
Yes, I would have to go back to the Washington Street, I can't remember, this I think is the wine red color on the siding here. This is the gray shingle
Okay,
color here. And so I imagine that this would be one of the things that we thought would help especially in the courtyards, is to use the lighter colors more.
Right.
The darker colors, because it'll help to make the space feel more open and a little brighter, when you're inside. So, if we thought about taking that red color around to this point, and then we have the gray shingles here, and maybe the gray shingles come over into this point, and from that point over, it's that yellow siding that kind of wraps around the back of the rest of the courtyard. That would help to keep that piece in the back feel very light and open, which I think you really notice when you look into the courtyard, and see that. Because remember, the front door, how deep that courtyard is, getting those lighter colors in there will really help. I think the other thing that helps with the lighter colors is you're going to get the play of shadows much more pronounced on the lighter colors than you will on the darker colors. So I think that, especially in these courtyard areas, the use of some of those lighter colors will help to kind of brighten everything up.
I agree. I think there's a nice balance of the massing on those elevations also.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other things we've done is we've added the gutters and downspouts around here. Again, you'd have to zoom in. You could probably pick almost any part of the elevation. You should be able to, it should show.
You're going to have a lot of them with all those.
We're going to have a lot of downspouts. So for example, here's a downspout, here's a downspout. So every one of these pieces of gutter has to have a downspout associated with it. So here you can see the downspout with the bend that gets it back to the inside corner, the way that it's shown here. So we've now shown the gutters and the downspouts on all of the
And
elevations.
are they the color represented here of the gutter, their same color for the downspout?
Yes. The answer is
Which,
yes.
I know the lights are out, but it looks like white or an off-white of some.
It's white, yes.
Okay.
Isn't it both?
So,
Sailcloth, it looks like.
I mean, I guess with the number of downs, and we can talk about the color scheme,
Yep,
we will get into that a little more. I have a little bit of concern with the number of downspouts,
yes,
that it'll be very distinct on the elevation, because that's the only white on that elevation, at least as you're proposing it.
Yes, I think
Something
that,
to think about.
right, and I think that one of the ways we're trying to kind of mitigate the appearance of the downspouts is putting them in the inside corner. So I think one of the benefits we get from the projecting balconies is that it does create an inside corner in which we can locate the downspouts. I'm not saying they go away entirely, but they're not nearly as dominant. They probably look more clear on this elevation than they might in reality, simply because they're rendered, black and white. And you can see them very
Would there be any
clearly there.
consideration to color the downspouts to match the trim or the siding that they're in front of? Just a thought,
No, I agree.
because we have so many of them on here.
So much content.
Just, while you're looking at that, do the downspouts tie into the storm sewer system, or do they just drain to grade?
But I wondered where they go and where all this water's going.
Does the city have an answer for that?
I don't think we know that yet. Typically, I think we try and tie them into the storm sewer where possible.
Otherwise, we'd have a lot of discharges on the sidewalk, which we wouldn't want, so
Right,
I would
some ice
presume we're
and-
gonna
We
have.
haven't seen the civil layout yet, so
Okay.
we don't know for sure yet.
I believe the guidelines talk about that. I'd have to look. But for a development of this scale, it talks about
I think we would encourage it
the
if,
drainage to tie directly into the
we
storm
would, we
sewer.
would absolutely encourage it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's gonna be a
Otherwise,
lot
there'll
of
be a lot
water
of
coming
ice
up
on
those roads.
Oh, yeah.
That's,
Go on.
Especially on the sidewalks.
Right.
But even the courtyard, I don't, I
unofficial
think you want to find a way to collect that water.
well, keep in mind, the courtyard is relatively shallow with the soil, because it's on top of the garage, so there's really nowhere for it to go, so,
Right.
Yes, yeah.
that would be, the best solution is to
I'm
tie
sure
it
it's
into the
gonna have
storm
to be
sewer
tied in
system.
then, yeah.
So in response to the question about the color of the downspouts and the gutters, I think that the idea of not doing them in white and doing something that blends in with the siding color, and there are a couple of choices there. So one is, as we've shown on the elevation here, the fascia piece that we have is typically that yellowish color that we have, right? And so we could do a gutter and downspout that matches that. The other thing that's a little bit subtle, but you can see it in the rendering, the corner boards, typically there's a corner board every time that we turn the corner. And the corner board is, as it's shown on the mock-up here, it's a slightly different color. It's kind of a putty gray type color. So I think that would be the other option for the gutters and the downspout. So I think either one of those would be an improvement over doing it all in white.
And then one third one, you may have where the siding is red, I'm gonna call it the red, is the downspout red. So, like, there's potentially 3 or 4 different colors, and the downspouts may be different colors, but which one do you want to match? And I guess if you want to make a recommendation,
Well, typically, even the red has the lighter trim where the downspout would be placed.
Yes.
So in my mind, you'd want to match that trim, and then the downspout's going to visually kind of disappear.
I agree.
I agree. I believe that's called oyster shell, the trim.
that's
is
correct.
oyster shell.
Oyster shell, yeah.
And the
And-
fascia is sailcloth,
That-
right?
That's
Well,
correct.
yes,
And
yes.
the gutters, sailcloth and the gutters are fascia and gutters are called sailcloth, which have a different tone than the oyster shell,
What's the-
but we'll get to that.
Yeah, let's hold off on
Yeah.
looking at that in detail, because we need the lights up to do that.
Yeah.
We did have a question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, finish your.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Well, we're questioning making sure the downspouts tie into storm sewer.
Correct.
City staff said they expect it should, but they haven't seen that level of detail.
They will,
Okay,
yes,
That would be part of the civils when they submit those.
great. Thank you.
yes.
I found it finally, right, okay. In the
It
gutters.
is in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we've added wall-mounted light fixtures on the elevations. There aren't that many of them. Typically, they occur at the awnings at the retail areas that we have and over doors, especially exit doors. So there really isn't a lot of them that are shown. You can see some of them that are shown on the elevation that's up here right now. What they're actually lighting up, it's kind of hard to see in the non-rendered elevation, but this is a signboard that's up on top here, that those are lighting up. And then typically at the exit doors, it's kind of, more of a functional if you will, as opposed to decorative light fixture that's at the exit doors just to provide safety, lighting for safety at the exit doors.
So at the signboards, it looked like more of a period style, I don't
Yeah,
want to say
like a gooseneck type
Gooseneck,
style, exactly,
okay.
yes, yep.
And then I assume they're painted, is there a finish to them?
I think they show on the Wilson Street elevation. So
They're a lighter color on that
they're a
elevation.
lighter color again, what we're showing there is, again, that kind of yellowish color, if you will, against the brick background that we have there.
Okay.
Okay.
While you
and
have
then-
that up, Don.
Yep.
That's a good representation of what I had mentioned in my email related to the stepping of the foundation. And I know
Yes.
it's something that has to happen on a project when you have this kind of slope at grade. But if everybody can see, at the bottom of the dark line represents the street or the sidewalk. There's kind of a blank space there and it steps up. It's because you can't run the masonry down below grade. It's bad design to do that. So the foundation gets exposed. And I was just concerned that we don't want large sections of foundation exposed. I would say a foot to 18 inches max.
Right.
Which means more steps in the foundation.
Right. Now, this might be a little bit easier to control as we're working through the civil engineering grading along here that I talked about earlier. I think one of the things that's going to happen as a result of that, we're not going to get such a steep slope as you see here, which results in bigger steps along the way. So I think one of the things that will happen, we like to keep at the minimum point, we like to keep 6 to 8 inches.
Right.
Minimum there. That's just good practice to do that. And then what Tom is referring to is that if that step is too big, the way you get rid of that step is you put in another horizontal piece here and then step it again in the center here. So I think that's something that we can take a look at. And I think, the rule of thumb of, 18 inches, plus or minus for a step, we want to make sure it lines up with a brick course, so 16 inches might work well, because it works well with a brick,
that's true.
with brick
You'd
coursing
want
or
to stay
something like
masonry
that.
coursing.
Yeah,
And I would just add that we'd want to make sure that the finish is, a high-quality finish. We know concrete work can be very rough. You can see the form joints in a lot of foundation work that's not meant to be exposed. There's form ties that create little pockets in the
Right.
face.
Right.
So maybe we talk about it being rubbed out or something so that you get a little
yeah.
higher quality, right, knock the fins off.
Yeah, the fins will be knocked off, all the ties, the holes where the ties are, those will all be patched as part of the foundation. Yes. Okay, and then really, I think the last item I have to mention regarding the elevations is just generally coordination between the elevations, what's shown on the floor plans, what's shown on the landscape plan. So I think, aside from the couple of retail entries that I pointed out along Wilson Street, everything else should be pretty fully coordinated at this point. And that's all I had on the exterior elevations.
Were there any changes made to these elevations that we're seeing tonight that reflect some of the items that we requested? Obviously, we can see that the balconies and the small gables are the same as what we had seen before.
Right.
We asked about additional offsets, maybe creating some larger elements, focal elements in the center of this. It's a very long elevation. It's got both a lot of kind of rhythmic verticality and horizontality to it. I've looked at a lot of the other work that Shodine, and I know you have assisted him with. Geneva, Dodson Place is a good example.
Right.
Where you're working with the interplay of the mass of the facade to kind of break up the scale of the building largely. And this is much larger than what we see in Geneva, probably closer to what, is it Greenfield?
Greenfield.
But even that project isn't this tall. So my concern has been from the beginning that this is very large, that if we're not going to be able to address the height and the mass, can we do things visually that address the scale of the building, bring it down, bring some lower roof forms, project some elements out in the facade, possibly changing some of the materials up. Greenfield had a nice use of panelized system as opposed to the horizontal hardy board,
Okay.
which some forms projected out. We have that I have that in a PowerPoint if we want to look at it.
So I think the quick answer to your question is, no, we didn't really change the building plans in that regard. And there are a couple of different ideas there that I can try to address. I think generally, though, it's been our intent from the beginning to use the balconies and the gable roofs on the top as a way of trying to address the issue that you're talking about. And I think I've mentioned this before, and I think in the rendering that we had shown in one of the earlier meetings, it shows up better. But I think one of the things that's hard to appreciate as far as breaking up that plane of the building, as you're walking down the street, one of the things that's hard to appreciate is the effect that the gables have on that, because they really do break up that roof line against the sky. And I think, this is something that is really important. It'll be very noticeable, I think, when you're, walking on the street. We talked last time about how we're showing these elevations as if you're standing right in front of them. We're never going to see these buildings this way. You're always going to be looking at these buildings, from an angle. And so I think we've always been counting on, our concern is similar to yours. And I think the way that we've tried to address it is with the balconies, by projecting, having them partially recessed, partially projecting, dealing with using the gables on the top of them. The idea of bringing the roof line down, one of the ways that you do that is, so if I understand correctly, Tom, this is the gutter line that we have right now, the eave line. So one of the ways that you try to reduce the appearance of the height of the building is you bring that eave line down to, say, here instead, and then this becomes a dormer that pops up, or it becomes a piece that's recessed or something like that, that has a fairly dramatic effect on the unit plans and reduces the size of the unit plans. I think if we got involved in that, as we have in other projects, the projects where we've done it where it's allowed for that kind of accommodation more easily are where we have much larger unit plans to start with. Because when you get the recess in the roof, you're not reducing the effective floor area of the unit plan as much when you have that to work with. So I think it leads to it in a, with the unit plans like we have in this building, it leads to a different set of unit plans and less rentable area, if you will, in doing it. So I think we're sensitive to the concern that you're raising. I think that we've tried to address it in a different way.
Okay. I guess we can agree to disagree.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not a proponent of a building with, 60 gables on it, or whatever number we have here. I think it's just a little over the top. I think, again, a better interchange of the massing on the facade would actually improve overall the aesthetics and visually reduce the scale.
As an example, Tom, there's been some discussion, and I think you perhaps were going to refer to it, is the building that is similar in color scheme and similar in size is the Greenfields
Right.
of Geneva. That is, it's that building right there, Drew. Yep, and if you can get to a street, Yep.
Kesslinger Road.
maybe get out onto Kesslinger Road and get a view of it.
I did take some photos of that. It is in my PowerPoint.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Okay.
Tom's photos.
If you want to just go to my PowerPoint, it's probably easier.
Okay.
We can get the side, elevations.
One of the big differences between that, the Greenfields building and our building is that their balconies are flush. They don't project in and out.
Right.
And then also the gable roofs they use the gables in between the balconies versus on the balcony. So as Don was describing the view against the sky, you'll get that, I'll almost refer to it as a sawtooth keyway as you're walking along the building, looking up at the sky. At Greenfields, you wouldn't get that perspective. The gutter line would still be a flat line.
Did you lose it?
Yeah, I think it's on a flash drive.
Well, I have a flash drive if you want. You want to use my flash drive, or you have it?
One second, it's on the desktop. Let me just- There it is. Okay. It had just lost the pictures, so.
Oh, okay.
It reloaded.
It's near the, near the end of the, so I think it might be the, there you go.
There is that push-pull, though, with,
And we talked about it, that this kind of has a similar
yes, it does.
color scheme, although you said that the lighter color is a little creamier than what you're proposing here, but we can, again, talk about that. But now this is, well, this is 4 stories.
And if you, I don't know if you took it from any other angles, you're not seeing the garage entry.
I didn't take all
So there
angles.
you can see one, let's see, is that the garage entry on the right? I can't see through that tree, but so there you have 1, 2, 3, is that 4 on
If
top
you
of the
go,
garage?
I think there is one other image. Does that help?
Again, that is on, what I'm gonna say, on top of the hill. The
Okay.
opposite side is the.
Yeah, I
the
didn't take
lower-
all views.
Those are the only 3 in the
Yep.
PowerPoint.
Tom, and you, I think what you were referring to in some of those gables, did they go to a flat panel versus a shake? And, now,
Yes, correct.
and that flat panel, I don't know if it had a batten strips?
Yes, it did, yeah.
So,
Wasn't it metal roofs? Don't they have-
so that, can you zoom into that gable, Drew, by chance? Yeah. So is that that section where you're referring to is a flat panel? That,
Correct.
Oh, good, I'm glad you got
do you have an opinion about the flat panels, or?
I guess, thinking about the texture that you get with the siding that we're proposing, whether it's lap siding or the shingle-type siding, I think that's going to have a character that's more pedestrian-friendly, that has a friendlier feel to it than would a bunch of flat panels on the wall. I think one of the other differences in the building here, and it's not to say that these things can't be blended together somehow, but I think one of the other differences here is that this is not in a kind of urban-type setting. I think that one of the things we're trying to respect is the street wall as being an important element to get the retail along it. It's much more of an urban condition. And so I think, you know, that really, I hope, reinforces what it is you're trying to do in the downtown. You know, even traditionally, where you've had the faces of the retail buildings kind of right up on the street that kind of form that edge, you know, in that urban environment. So I think, you know, we're dealing with a slightly different condition here. I think the goals of what we're talking about, I think, are similar. I think we're just using different techniques to probably get there. But I would say that in choosing between a flat panel batten-type system and what we've proposed, I feel like what we've proposed is actually going to have more character to it because of the texture that you're going to get as opposed to the flat panel system.
Do you see that there's truly much difference in the projections and recessions? Because one doesn't have this doesn't have the balcony project, but it does have the other center project. So there's still this push and pull. So I guess I don't see that one's that different than the other for this.
No, I'm saying these things could be blended together. What I'm saying is that we chose to do it a different way. This is another way to do it. I'm just saying we chose to do it a different way. I think we're trying to address exactly the same issue that's been brought up. We've just chosen to do it in a different way.
Way. Okay. May I ask, I just had a question about What is the projection on the roof line, to kind of break that up? Is that a,
How far does the
What is-
soffit stick out from the face of the wall? Is that the
no,
question?
the small projection on the roof line, what is that?
He's circling.
It's a dormer.
A dormer, yeah, but why? This is in Greenfields, this isn't
I don't have an answer for you.
I didn't know why it was there.
Yeah. So if you saw a vent in it, it might be related to mechanical systems or something.
Probably.
It looks, yeah, it's either that or it's just decorative, yeah.
Okay, I just didn't know if it was part of the overall design facade or what, to break up the roof line or.
This facility is in an area where it's all open space, too.
Absolutely.
And it makes a big difference as far as even the bulk of it, because you see all this open space around it. And even though it's large, it isn't within the city downtown area. And that makes a big difference, I think, with the size.
Okay, you want to go back to the elevations? Any other questions or comments related to the elevations? Can you go to the Washington Street? Do you have those in color? I think you do. The main elevations are all in color, correct?
Yes, it's on the board up here as well.
Washington, I said street, I meant avenue.
It originally was actually platted as street after we
I
did
know,
some
I read the
refreezing,
article.
so, yeah, it's changed at some point.
Uh-huh. So I think from the beginning, we were very receptive to the Washington's Avenue elevation. And there are some distinct characteristics that make it appealing. Obviously, you've got some significant offsets with the courtyards. So the massing works well. You don't, at least from this elevation, don't have, that kind of repetitive, typical gable. And you've actually taken the entries and I thought done something very nicely proportionally with two gables, one nested in the other. And then you've brought down, it looks like a different color shake or shingle, wall shingle.
Right.
It looks like the darker color as opposed to the gray.
Right. So I mentioned earlier that one of the problems with elevation drawings is that we rarely see a building that way. This particular elevation is one of those exceptions because you are going to be able to stand on Washington Street and kind of look back and see this. So I think the making a bigger deal, if you will, out of the entry with the use of the double gable, we recognize this is one of those rare instances where you are going to be able to see it kind of dead on, kind of right on. And so, part of it was giving a kind of hierarchy to the building that I think is important by calling out the entries, especially at the back of these courtyards. You can also see, I think here, the intent with carrying the yellow siding around and kind of bringing it up to the entry and then doing the entry in a different color that really gives it a pop and a focus. And so, this was very intentional because of, it's the entry to the building, it's at the back of the courtyards, so we felt that that was appropriate. I do think that you're going to see this facade differently than you are any other facade. That being said, I agree. This has always been our favorite elevation as well by virtue of the courtyards that you have there that helped, break up the facade. But this is also not a street where we're necessarily trying to reinforce the retail aspect. I think that the continuity that we have on Wilson Street is really very appropriate for trying to reinforce the retail scale and the retail development in the downtown area. So I think they're really serving two different purposes. We really wanted this to have a different character because it's the residential identity for the project, if you will.
Any other thoughts on the Washington elevation?
I like the Washington elevation. I'm asking now about the pitch on the double gable is a pretty steep pitch. Is that like a 12-12?
Yes, it is.
And then the larger single gable, is that maybe a 4 or 6-12?
So if you can just hold on this elevation for a second here. Generally, the ridge line of the building, which is set right here, is determined by, that's a 4 and 12 slope, which is the minimum slope that you want to put on a shingle roof. And that's the height that you get when you span the building, all the way across the building. So we put a roof all the way across the building. That's what establishes that ridge line. So when you get to this gable here, we didn't necessarily want to come up above that ridge line. We wanted to tie into it, which is what determined this slope on this piece here. When we get to the balconies, we have a little more freedom because we have more height to work with there. So we put in the steeper pitch there. And then the one spot on the building where we thought it okay to kind of violate this idea of, getting above the ridge line was again at the entry. It's another thing that's going to set that part of the building off, I think, from everything else as well. But we do have this double gable feature. This is not the only place on the building it's shown. I'm going to point to this drawing. You can see, for example, that it's shown here, kind of opposite the corner. So you have the tower on one side, you have the double gable on the other side as a way of, addressing the corners and kind of balancing the corner there.
The steeper pitch is more attractive in my opinion. It's better for the roof too. I'm surprised you're going with a 4/12 pitch.
It's such a long span, to get all the way across the building. It's 65 feet. So, every time you go, if you went up to 6/12, 8/12, something like that, you end up with a very big roof on top of the whole thing. I think, a lot of the concern that's been raised is with regard to the apparent massing of the building. And I think if we were to put a steeper pitch roof on it, it would really increase that appearance as well.
Be a lot bigger, huh?
Yeah.
Keeping it on that elevation, just talking about a few of the details. Below the windows on the lower residential unit, you have a kind of blank white panel. Can you tell us what that is?
That's intended to be cut stone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this is in the masonry portion of the building, so we have a cut stone sill at each of the windows, and then we have a slightly different detail where it sits on top of the more rusticated type stone down below here. So instead of carrying the rusticated stone up into that, we thought it looked better to get a kind of a bigger reading of this window with the cut stone underneath it.
So that happens on that condition pretty much all the way around the building?
Well, you don't have the residential that goes all the way around the building. If you flip around to the State Street elevation, that might be the other one to take a look at. That would be
You do have it on the State Street.
So we
You
have it
actually
on the State Street elevation as well, right?
Yeah, you have it up at what is effectively the third level of the building, because that's where the residential starts.
Correct,
You also have it at the windows into the garage.
yes.
And in that elevation, it's brick as opposed to stone. What is the transition between masonry and the wood or the hardy board?
The siding here,
Yeah,
it's a little hard to see, but there's a piece of trim, projected trim, that would be hardy board, this would be painted trim, that actually projects from the siding, and it wraps in a band over the top of this window. It kind of frames this window, but it comes over the top of the window, and then when it hits this part here, above the brick, it runs horizontally above the brick. So it's like a water table that kind of
It
sheds water.
overlaps the brick.
It overlaps the
Okay.
brick, exactly.
that's kind of what I was asking. You want to make
Yes.
sure you shed the
Yes.
water off.
Yep,
And that's flat, correct? But the rusticated stone is the sample that you brought?
yeah, the stone piece is on the bottom here, yes,
And it's
yes,
Yeah, the other's a
That's-
cut stone,
cut stone.
right?
right, right,
Which is pretty typical and
yes,
has a traditional flavor to it,
yes.
right?
I think it's actually a detail, I think it's actually on the existing tower on the church. There's a detail
Correct.
like
Yes.
that.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, ties in nicely with that.
Yeah.
Was there any consideration of taking masonry further up on the building? I know we asked about this earlier, and there's been some resistance to that. I've been told by staff that it's cost prohibitive. Before we get to your answer, though, where we do have masonry is all at the garage, pretty much. Is that a concrete wall behind it? Is the garage all poured-in-place concrete?
no, we're in the process of working this out right now with a structural engineer and some potential contractors who will construct the garage. And so the answer is no. There will be concrete columns periodically, and then there'll be infill behind the brick, whether it's block or, whatever it is behind it, as a backup wall.
But cars are parking against that, and they're
Yes.
elevated. I'm just curious, is there a guardrail then that would be placed on the garage side to ensure that, a car couldn't go through
cars
that wall?
No, typically you put in wheel stops. Yeah, they're wheel stops.
Wheel stops,
Yeah.
okay. So, but it could be a metal frame or a wood frame wall?
Typically not in a garage,
That's what I'm asking.
yeah.
It'd be concrete block then, possibly?
Typically concrete.
Okay, so that would be a solid masonry wall in
Yes,
that
it would.
location.
Yeah.
So if you took it up further on the building, it would obviously be a veneer, it wouldn't be solid masonry. Because the walls above that are all wood frame?
Yes. And technically, the brick is all veneer. None of it's solid masonry anymore. It's all veneer. It's all cavity wall construction.
Right.
The brick is all veneer, actually.
Understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So could you answer that question about the
I'm sorry, the
masonry?
question was raising the brick
Potentially
up-
bring masonry up the
bringing the
base of
masonry
the
up-
wall in some
up
locations.
higher. Are there particular elevations where you think that would be beneficial, or?
Well, I mean, I had suggested some drastic change in the massing of the building at one time, stepping it down, et cetera.
Yeah,
Obviously, that's not going to happen.
right.
But again, from my perspective, this is a long building that has a lot of repetition to it, and I haven't seen that in other
So I-
architecture that you've done in the area. And so I'm just suggesting that there are ways of impacting the elevations visually by a change in material, and masonry
No, I
is
I
very
understand what
effectively
you're-
to do
yes,
that.
Yeah. So I think there are really two elevations where this question is relevant. I think it's the Wilson Street elevation and the State Street elevation. Because on the Washington Street elevation, it's really irrelevant. On the River Street elevation, there's very little building that's on the River Street elevation. So I think it's really these two elevations that we're talking about. And so I don't know if it's a cost issue, would it make sense to take some of the brick off of the State Street side and put it on the Wilson Street side, for example? Or, I'm trying to think of other ways to do this. I think that we've used the brick at a constant height across here. I mean, one other way to think about it is that you pop it up in certain areas and you drop it down in other areas or something like that and get some variation. But I think the balconies interrupt that datum line sufficiently that I'm not sure we're really going to get that much bang, out of that. I don't know. Let me ask my client if he has an opinion on this.
We believe that the masonry on, if you added any, or where we added the height that's to the bell tower, and it's really to have the bell tower be the focal point on this elevation. Quite the contrary, on the State Street elevation, we still feel that there's too much masonry on that elevation, especially as you get towards the west end of the building or the right end of the building.
I
And
don't disagree. You're getting 3 stories of masonry.
It's a big wall.
It's a big wall, and you got a lot of, again, horizontality going there. I was actually thinking along the lines of what Don said of maybe borrowing some there and strategically looking at another location. Possibly the Washington Street corner element could have some, at Washington Avenue and State Street could have some masonry go up a little higher on the building. Just a thought. But I was actually thinking again of forms in the middle, different than just a color change in the siding that interrupted the kind of regularity of the patterning of the balconies and the windows.
So if we hold on this elevation for a second, if I understand what you're suggesting, Tom, it might be, for example, Forget the fact that this is a State Street elevation for a minute. But if we took the brick that's shown here, we left this datum line, brought the siding down to here, and then took this brick and basically filled it in here or something, so that the brick kind of came along, it jumped up, came across, maybe it came back down and across or something. Is that the kind of thing that you're thinking of? or-
Yes. I'd just be interested if you looked at that to see
Okay.
if there was any merit to doing that.
Okay,
And maybe it's not all the way across. It might be, say, from the two right-hand balcony elements here, which are kind of centrally located. You know, could something different happen in this zone where masonry came up, and maybe there's a different roof line that happens so that you, again, get away from that pattern of, 60 gables. And I'm not sure, maybe you can borrow some of that masonry from here too.
yeah, I think that's what Dave was saying, that
So-
especially when you get down at
Right.
this end of the
So
building.
we can
there's-
remain sensitive to the
Right.
cost aspect of it,
Right,
because you got 3 stories of masonry there, and I don't think anyone's even going to perceive it. But I would suggest on both the Washington and, the State and Wilson Street elevations, I think Wilson is as or more important from.
Right.
This is my opinion. I know design is subjective largely.
Speaking of the Wilson Street elevation, I'm sorry, I have a question on that. So Drew, could you put that back up again? I overlooked it when you asked if there was, basically the central part where it goes back to the, I believe that area, and it shows a lot of verticality. Those windows, can you describe what's going on there?
yes, that's what I was trying to point out in the black and white elevations we were looking at earlier. So, because here I think it was so far in the background, we didn't try to render it exactly, because it's on an angle, it's kind of tough to, but if you look at the black and white elevations, what you'll actually see there is that this is all, it's the same language of siding and windows that's carried across that back there.
Okay.
Yes.
So those windows aren't truly that.
No, it's not like a curtain wall that's
Yeah,
back
that's
there
what it
or
is.
something, right.
And how about the roof line there? What's going on with the roof?
So what you're reading here are, this is one of these things, this wall is not perpendicular to this wall that we're looking at in elevation here. It's actually at a slope. So one of the things that you're reading is the projection of balconies as that kind of recedes into the background, back to that corner there.
Okay. Sorry. I stand up, out.
Yep,
This roof line above, what is that?
those are the roofs that are over the balconies. Okay, so what
Okay.
you're looking at here, these are actually the porch pieces.
And they project,
Now, maybe from what.
If you
I'll
go,
try
if
to-
you go to a floor plan, that'd probably help.
She's not done, she's not.
Yeah, there you go, there you go. So we're looking at, that elevation is as if we're looking at it dead on here,
first one, okay.
right?
At bird's eye, yeah.
As if you're standing here and you're looking at it at 90 degrees dead on here. When you get down to this corner and you're looking down along here, see the way this wall flares out a little bit?
Uh-huh.
So imagine there are a series of balconies that are out here, okay, that are kind of projecting into that plane of view, if you will.
Each one,
because-
as you get farther back, the next one steps out a little bit further, then the next one a little bit further. So when you look at a plane, they all kind of blur
Right.
together, and you see the,
The floor plan.
Okay.
Maybe the roof plan would be,
Sorry.
Yeah, the roof plan would help.
yeah.
The other ones are here, but
The roof plan may be just,
It's A106.B,
here we go.
yeah.
or, I'm sorry,
Yeah, so if you go down to the one below that,
106.
it's gonna be, you're not gonna get the full effect of it here. This will help though. So that that Wilson Street elevation that we were looking at, this is the Wilson Street elevation right here.
Okay,
So that elevation is taken as if you're looking at it dead on, facing this facade here, right?
Perpendicular to that elevation.
Right. So when you come around the corner, every time you come around a corner that's 90 degrees, you're seeing this roof element, for example, the side elevation of it. Same thing when you come, so you're seeing this roof piece here as if you're looking at it dead on, the same as this here. The problem is when you get back to here where the building bends like this, and then see the way this roof line, so now this roof line, imagine if you extended the corner of that roof line down to the elevation drawing. Okay, you get this series of kind of setbacks, so it is hard to read, but it's kind of a true projection of the geometry of the building to that
Okay.
facade there, yes.
and the wall that we see that at the bottom is that just masonry in color, the reddish color, and then the cream above it, that's flat masonry?
You're back on the elevation?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on the elevation.
On Wilson Street? Are you on Wilson Street?
Back to, back,
It's all brick.
no, Drew, go back.
It's loaded.
Right there, in the center, where the alley goes back, where the cut goes back, what is that flat wall we see back there?
This back here?
Yeah,
That is actually the side wall of the pool deck
okay.
that you see way back there,
Sidewall, the pool deck, okay.
yes.
As is the red at the bottom, what is that? I'm saying red, it's really not red. I think you call it
I
cinnamon.
think that's, what it's trying to show is that the alley actually slopes up as you go back, so that you're actually looking at the road as it kind of recedes and rises as it goes back into the alley piece there. I think, is that, yeah.
So what's at the end of that alley? What are we looking at?
The sidewall of the pool deck.
Actually-
It's a blank wall. There's no, it's a blank wall. There's
The
nothing
last-
there at the
And
end.
it's masonry?
Yeah.
Or brick?
It's siding,
I mean, masonry is brick, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
siding, okay.
yes.
The last sheet in the handout,
Okay,
the very last sheet in our handouts, A204 shows that sidewall, and it is masonry.
Shows it as me, okay, I'm mistaken then.
So it's the same brick that it has on the River Street facade, which makes sense. You go around the corner, it's all
With the
brick.
step that comes back to the inside corner.
okay,
So all the way down the alley, you're gonna see brick.
all right, that's fine with me,
And it's hard to represent in an elevation that's
that's fine.
got a sloping grade.
Brick is good, brick is good.
We also see the full elevation of the west facade of the building on A202. Which is interesting, because you have masonry come all the way, I'm assuming I got the right,
No, that's right. And so in this one, Tom, the masonry comes back along the alleyway to kind of correspond with the walkway that gets you back into the garage.
you stop though, and then it turns into, looks like a shingle.
The shingle siding, yes.
Why wouldn't it just be masonry all the way across? Is that just a
Uh,
cost
again-
consideration?
Yeah, again, it's kind of a service area of the building. It's not occupiable.
And then, I didn't notice this before, but there are actually retail spaces that front on the alley? Okay,
That's just turning the corner, right? So there's no.
right, but there's windows there. I
There's
didn't-
windows there. There's no access into it off of the alley.
No, but that's kind of nice.
Yeah, the intent is that when you're walking down that alley, it's
Right.
not a cold
Right.
enclosed space that
Right.
you can see in and people can see you.
Not a canyon.
It can, yes.
I had a question on the balconies. And you guys provided a section which helps us see that. Now I've lost where that's at. Probably on the last page. But in looking at other facilities and the the one in Geneva you did, I noticed the underside of the balconies is covered. And I realize these are wood frame. I don't think it'd be appealing to look up from either Wilson or State and see a lot of exposed, which is really raw lumber, treated lumber on the underside of the balconies.
What are we using?
We're going to paint those. It's the underside treated, will be painted. And then you'll get a two-tone with a Trex decking type material. You'll get a different color of the joist versus the actual decking.
Yeah, I understand from a practical perspective that you don't want to cover that, because obviously the elements get in and through the decking. It's not weather tight. But I did notice in Geneva that you did cover them, and I thought, well, that's kind of a nice look. It looked like you covered it with maybe an open slat wood or something. I don't know if you remember that. You might look at it.
The Dotson, there's
Which,
a store retail.
which project are you referring to, Tom?
The one near the train station, is that Dodson?
Dodson, yeah,
But that's because there's retail on the first floor.
yeah.
My recollection, and so you have to cover those decks.
Which we have here.
But here,
On Wilson Street, yeah.
but the decks are projecting out beyond the retail, where they're not like that at Dotson.
Yeah, I don't recall the detail at Dodson that you're referring to.
Yeah, I have an image of it. Once we get to my PowerPoint, we can look at it.
Tom, are you, just for clarification, are you saying that the roofs then of the ceilings, I should say, of the balconies, each one is above another, so is that the material you're using?
Yeah, there's no ceiling.
To a
It's
balcony?
exposed underside wood that you would see in a residential deck. But in this case, they're all elevated above you, so as you look up the facade of that building, you're gonna see the underside of all the exposed lumber. Now,
Right.
Dave's saying you're painting those.
We paint it, yes.
Could they be lumber and stained? I just had an idea about referring to our arch on River Street. It's that stained wood with the stainless steel or whatever says River Street on it. I wondered if you carried that stained wood somewhere with this as a, perhaps underneath or under the overhang of each balcony, if wood as a material is softer.
Well, it's a treated material, which has that green tone to it.
Oh, if it's
Staining
womanized,
it.
does
I'll
not
put-
work?
You get that green, typically you get the green that bleeds through the stain. And you get a murky looking stained color, and that you have to do a solid stain or a paint
Okay.
on that treated material.
But then, okay. I have seen that done underneath a gable as it projects, and it,
Sure.
Now, on the gable, that's different than underneath the deck.
okay,
So are you underneath the roof structure versus underneath the porch
you
deck?
don't use the same, okay.
Yeah, so it would be painted underneath the roof deck, and I believe that do we have a finish on this? I believe the gable's finished, isn't it?
The underside of the gable is
The underside of the
Yes.
gable
Is
is finished.
finish painted?
It'll be another material in the hardy board family of materials, but, so it'll be more of a flush siding. They actually make one that looks like kind of beaded car siding. That might be appropriate to use there.
Okay, okay. I just, any kind of wood would soften the effect, any kind of stained wood, I thought would,
So I think if you paint the structural members underneath the balconies, the same color as the way, as the rest of the balcony framing, it'll look like a unit. It'll look like it's all integrated together. And then as Dave was saying, when you put the Trex decks on top of that, so the structural members are gonna be spaced 16 inches on center. You're gonna see 16 inches of that, the underside of that Trex decks, which will have a different color. It should look finished. It's not as if it'll look unfinished, I would say.
I'm not sure I do, but that's okay.
Okay. Anything else? Commission?
I had something about the railings on the balconies. Those are what, materials? Those are there.
It's a prefabricated aluminum system.
As sampled here.
Yeah, I did see that today, prefab. And what about the glass? I see a glass panel between that. Is that going to be used?
No, we have the sample of the manufacturer because we have the two different colors of the fence. So, no, that's the manufacturer's all-inclusive sample of everything he provides.
Okay.
And we could turn it on and plug it in for you, even has lights built into it, but we're not doing
No, I did see that too. Is that in the plan at all?
No, it is not.
I saw those lights, yeah, very mood elevating, right?
If you guys would bear with me, I did do a PowerPoint. I know we've seen some of these images again. I just want to stress, especially for our viewers tonight, what we're talking about as far as some of the ideas with the visual impact of the elevations. So first of all, these slides relate to what I call the downtown context, because it was mentioned in the committee of the whole meeting, and we'll get to those guidelines a little bit later. But you can see, obviously, the view east on Wilson, and there have been imagery presented by Shodine previously that will drastically impact that view, because on the east end there, you're going to see this development, and it will block out the school, for instance, which is one of our key historic buildings in the area. As you go east on Wilson, you've got a variety of architecture, some of it rather historic, masonry, there's interplay of wood elements, wood frame buildings, some sloped roofs, flat roofs. Go to the next slide, please. Looking back the other direction, we obviously have the two churches, the one on the corner at Washington and Wilson is in the state of demolition. I think it was at least the intent to try to salvage as much of the masonry as possible for reuse. We can talk about that in a bit. But very identifying characteristics of the streetscape. Across the street from this development is kind of a unique residential building with some interesting roof lines. Next slide, please. Directly across Wilson is this very interesting bank building, and then some of the adjacent historic buildings. And then on the east side of River is an open lot, so there's not a lot to relate to there. And then as you go down River Street, obviously this is, in my opinion, a very successful redevelopment of the streetscape. And, you know, these buildings, again, vary in character. I know some of the things that Dave has referred to in the architecture, trying to be sensitive to the scale with at least the retail, glazed openings, et cetera. But if you go further north there, then you've got, you know, again, a variety of architecture. And then we have the Quonset hut, which, you know, is unique in and of itself. And then you get up to the Washington Avenue street, and you're back to kind of a residential character. One thing nice about the development is I think it does fairly well relate on the Washington facade to the residential character of that street. So if you go to the next slide, we have the historic school across the street, but then you get into very typical single-family, you know, gable roof forms in that area. So when you talk about context, I think what we were always trying to stress from the beginning that it's very eclectic, and there's no specific architectural style that we can refer to. And so we always gravitated back to the scale and mass. Because in our opinion, it was always this project is very out of scale with the context of the neighborhood. And that is the reason that we wanted the facility to be more sensitive to that scale by stepping it down, especially towards the River Street corner, because by the time you come from Washington to River, you've added effectively 2 stories to the height of the building. So it's effectively somewhere in the 6 to 7 story range, which I don't think we have anything in the Tri-City area that we can speak to that has that height to it. If you go to the next slide, just walking through some of these are the things, this is obviously one of your projects. I personally think it's very successful. It has a great scale to it. Really nice interplay of the elevations. Again, you're projecting forms out to, again, get away from just that kind of flat plane. Here you have lower roof forms at the retail level that are actually under the balconies. So these do project, and in a closer up view, you'll see that you did cover the underside of the balcony, kind of matching the color of the entire facade. But even this is, in my opinion, very successful in diminishing the height of the building. And so, when I talk about moving forms in and out, I'm not necessarily saying that you have to do anything drastic with what's going on inside. Obviously, this projects out and you get maybe another foot or 2 of space in the units behind there. But it does a great job of, again, playing with the scale, the overall scale and massing of the facade. This building is 3 stories tall. We're anywhere from 4 to 6 stories tall. So think about 3, and on the River Street side, 3 more. Pretty significant. Go to the next slide. I'll go through these fairly quickly. Similar examples. I liked what you guys did here. Rather than just continue to repeat the gables all the way along, you basically just did a little different adaptation of the slope of the roof. You can see how it flips up as opposed to the main roof form adjacent to it. This roof form comes down right over the top of the window. So again, you're playing with the plane of the roof visually without impacting what's happening in the units behind it. Next slide. I've continued to be a proponent of corner balconies. I think you did it very successfully here. Again, what it does is it kind of relieves the mass at the corner, which is critical in my mind, especially on the River and State Street corner because of the height of the building. Again, examples represented on the balance of the building. Go ahead, next slide. Talked about the offset walls, great way to break up the mass. Next slide. Another project, I love the way I'm not particularly excited about the architecture. I don't think that I want to speak to specific architecture here as much as I just want to, again, point out examples of how these buildings have successfully diminished the visual height by taking a roof line and literally just wrapping it around below the upper unit and turning that upper unit into what appears to be an attic space, yet very effectively maintaining the integrity of the mass of the building. Here, just a projecting bay, a couple lower roof forms before you get to the top of the building. Does a great job, again, of bringing the scale down. Again, corner balconies. Go ahead. Another similar example, again, interplay of the roof forms. I'm not real excited about the repetition of the gables here, but these are projecting out. There is a little difference in the use of the material on the face of this. We talked about that. Again, lower roof forms at the main level. Next slide. I like this building. It does a lot of really interesting things. Not necessarily proponent of the architecture for us, but great way to turn a corner rather than just square it off. maybe it's something to consider at River and State. You did carve out the first floor space to at least work to open up that corner a little bit, which is what I was talking about earlier, where we currently have that open corner and a plaza there where we had some artwork. But again, taking the roof forms down, bringing the masonry up, if you go to the next slide, done very successfully on this building. Lower roof form. Next slide. You can see right up, this case, right up to the street, we don't have this condition. We're set back another probably 8 to 10 feet total from the curb, but getting creative and actually bringing some of the forms out over the street. Next slide, please. Another one of your projects, talked about this previously, incorporating the upper units into the roof line. Next slide. And I know, Don, you've talked about that. In that case, that would definitely impact the, available living space at that floor, because that unit would have to be set back from the face to do that. But you have done a couple things here with bringing the masonry up the facade again. Next slide. Again, not a proponent of the architecture, but it's starting to get you a sense of the height of the building. Just very simply took a form out in the middle of that tall gable. Next slide. This is up in Vernon Hills, so as I drove around, I saw examples. This brings some bays out in the center of the forms to bring down the scale. Again, a lower roof form here. Next slide. And this is in St. Charles, actually. These are under construction. Has a more residential scale. I'm not saying that this would be appropriate necessarily for this project, but does some of the same things that I've been talking about. Next slide, please. And another one of your projects, we already talked about this, but you've done a nice job of bringing the masonry up on the facade, a little change in the use of the materials, and then lower roof forms similar to this that help bring the scale down. So, not to take that any further, but that's what we have been wanting to convey to you in working with us in my mind, the two primary elevations, Wilson and State Street. So I don't know if there's any receptivity beyond what we've discussed tonight. I know that I heard the word 50-50 when City Council directed the project to come back to us, that there's compromise both ways as far as what we're looking to achieve for this project. And I would hope that you would be receptive to some of those ideas that you have used very successfully in other projects in neighboring communities. I don't know if you have any response to that.
If I could just interject, one of the other things that City Council did give as advice in this matter is not to discuss the changing of roof lines. So I think it might be an unfair question to ask the developer.
Okay, so why would the City Council tell us not to change roof lines? So if he wanted to come back and agree that we don't need 60 gables, we can't change the number of gables on this building?
I'm just reiterating what City Council gave as advice for this meeting, so.
Okay. It just seems strange to me because it's a significant component of the elevation of the building. We've already agreed that we can't change the mass, we can't change the number of units. We're not supposed to talk about parking. We're not supposed to talk about traffic. It ties our hands as far as what we want to recommend and suggest that would be an improvement from our perspective.
If I may, I think one of the things that we have to focus on is really, frankly, moving this out of design review and forward. So I think what I would look for the Plan Commission to do is to make specific recommendations as to what you would like to see on the building, as conditions of the design review, and forward that then if to the developer, and if he wishes to appeal that, obviously that's his prerogative. But I think that's where we need to move forward, is to make recommendations as to what you specifically want to see, and move it out of design review at this point.
Well, we could have done that in 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting and voted, but I think what we're trying to do is, and I think they've done a great job of bringing us a lot of additional information that's been helpful in us communicating about what we can agree on as far as what the final product of the project is. If we sit here and just say, these are the conditions, and we approve or deny, I guess we'd approve in that case with conditions. And then it leaves this forum. What recourse do we have to come back to follow up to make sure that we're satisfied with whatever ultimately is decided? And then is that decision placed in the hands of City Council, who told us very directly they didn't want to be involved in the design review? So now they're in the midst of the design review.
Right, but the ordinance outlines the design review and then the appeal process. If the developer does not agree with the final conclusions of the Plan Commission, anybody can do that. Walgreens could have done it, anybody could have done it. So, I mean, that's what the developer has done. The appeal has been remanded back to you for further consideration. If you can come to some conclusion and agreement with the developer as to changes that you would like to see, then, as I had mentioned, the design review and then ends here. But if the developer is not satisfied with the conditions that you're recommending, it then goes to the City Council for final decision.
I agree, but I guess I'd like to hear from Dave if there was any consideration for some of the things that we've discussed.
We have talked internally about some of those changes, and we think that you're somewhat mixing apples and oranges with different products and different construction types. You refer to the condominium buildings, which were a for sale product, which were 2,000 square foot units, which allow for that cutback into the building, into the floor plate. They were structural steel and precast buildings, which allow you to do different structural designs, cantilevering, things of that sort. The way these buildings are built, the direction of the floor trusses don't allow for you to project out from that the face, because of the structural system is in essence parallel to the face. We're also talking about a for sale product versus a rental product, and so the short answer is no. We are not prepared to go back and start moving the roof, moving the front walls, or extending or cantilevering various elements of the structure. We are still quite pleased with the building elevation, and we think that the breaking it down of horizontally with the brick identifying to us identifies that as the commercial component of the downtown, with the residential component above it. I think if you wanted to start pulling brick up and down, sure, it solves the cost if from taking it from one facade to another, but I think we miss a part of the design even in doing that. And so we read this as retail. The brick is the retail, very commercial, versus above that line is the residential. It's a softer material. So maybe the short answer, I'm sorry to say to you that I can't please you, but the answer is no, we're not prepared to make those large fenestration movements other than what we currently have on the plan.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from the commission?
No, but aren't we going to talk about color also before we close?
Yeah, I think we're probably done with the slides. We can turn the lights up.
Please.
Hopefully, everybody's still awake.
Oh, yeah, very.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break? Okay, can we take a 5-minute break without issue? Let's take a 5-minute break. I know I need a 5-minute break.
Sorry. Me too. I tapped my pen at one time, she was sleeping there. I thought, oh, you weren't sleeping? Oh, yes. Just, because I thought if the camera focuses on you. I say, oh, look at that, you know? He's so bored, he's sleeping. Jeff was sleeping too, I think, over there. Well, okay. I'll take that back. Completely take it back. Oh, boy, huh? I suppose the bathroom is probably a line.
The colors are similar to my house.
Are they?
Yes.
I still don't like
I
that.
like the combo.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of putting like a cream color and a gray together, but I think that looks really nice.
I have a yellow with Merlot.
Nice.
Stand
Oh, beautiful.
top of the ramp. Individuals that need to get to the north half of the building.
It does light up.
Additional
Plug it in.
I know. I'm disappointed to know we're not going to get the lights.
I don't know how to.
Yes, it really is.
And we could have it lit up in different colors for different seasons.
I was going to suggest to him that he try a wheelchair, or he try it with a walker.
Blue and orange
You know,
for
I mean,
bears.
Totally unrealistic for handicapped people, but I suppose I can add that, huh, as a suggestion? Or is that not something that I shouldn't add?
I just don't
Did they have the like stained beadboard
change
under
it,
them?
any
Yeah, that's nice. I do too. I think that's a really nice.
those, that ramp, you're still going to
We're in Iowa.
travel the
Oh,
same.
you know what? Isn't that something?
We don't, the maximum amount of distance is not going to change. You may be able to shift
Oh,
Those are nice, yeah.
20, 30 feet
that sounds cool.
of travel, level
Was it
travel
real modern looking with the?
for some of the residents, but you're not going to reduce it
Right.
for everyone. And where you're reducing it for some,
Ah,
you're
I've
then
never seen
adding it
anything
for
like that.
So there's gonna be a net effect.
Oh, that's
If you have to calculate the travel distance, all residents
It's always like the
using
first thing
that
I think of
entrance,
now is like, can a child
it's
fit
gonna
through
be
there?
per feet. The ramp one way or another, it's still gonna be the same X number of feet. Whenever you're decreasing the amount of travel from one person.
Yeah, I don't trust my children here with the staircase here.
Don't, please don't.
Because
We
my
do
kids
have
are
a plan
monkeys
for a
anyway.
renovation this year. It will
Good.
be fixed this year.
Yes, because I don't even turn anything in when I have my kids.
Oh, I know,
because
don't.
They're taken.
I would be scared.
It would be my
Seen a
child
little
that
boy
would do
about that.
silly like that. God bless them.
They find a way, but you think it's least possible.
Right.
What's funny, when you use that yellowish green, I don't see anything else but the Merlot color.
I'm good.
I was, there's an app called
House, yeah.
and I was trying to figure out to change it, update our house a little bit, but there's nothing that really, unless you
You
do
like
white.
better. That's the color that my interior walls are in our kitchen.
Yes,
And it's the same thing. Like, we did that when we first moved into the house, and we've been there for almost 14 years now.
and yellow was really in for kitchens at that time. I still think it's nice. We might even change our kitchen to
Ours
yellow.
is the Merlot. Yeah, but I was looking at the yellow, and I couldn't decide which way to go. But, who knows, maybe now I'll change to the yellow,
Yeah, there you go.
because they are so complimentary.
They really are.
I said it's hard to get a true impression of the colors with the lighting.
not?
Ship has sailed.
Yes, yes, yes. It's very much so.
Elevation, I really don't like. I thought this was it. Just the west elevation.
Oh,
Across. All that yellow.
you like yellow?
I don't mind yellow, but I think it's the straight.
They've got a fixation. I'm going to ask for a change. I wish I had other samples of their other. Yeah, yeah.
Me? What's this? They went that away.
Just care for the color palette.
I know.
How wide,
Tell them we're ready to start.
how wide do you think the trim on the windows are?
4.
Is that,
Yeah,
looks
I think
narrow.
it's, let's call the meeting back to order. We're chasing down staff right now, but, Sue, you had a question about the trim around the
How wide?
windows?
How wide is the window trim? Dave?
Approximately 4 inches. It's the 1x4, so it could be the 3 3/4, but that is the trim, the width of the trim board that you see
That's what-
on the mock-up, yes.
And that's pretty standard for the other buildings that you built? I mean, that we were seeing? These, and the drawing, all I'm saying is it looks narrower than that, and I think a wider trim is appropriate.
I believe that is pretty close to standard, and I'm thinking some of the buildings that were in Tom's presentation had no trim. And some of them, there's no trim wrapped around the windows, so, but I believe it is, yes, pretty much standard.
Standard 4-inch.
Here,
Yes.
let's turn down the heat, huh, at a certain time.
Any other questions, comments on the elevations? If not, we have a process in front of us here, as soon as I can find your memo. So,
I have a question. Are we
Sure.
gonna talk, will we talk about color, or is that what you're getting to, Tom, or,
no, we can talk about the color.
okay?
Go ahead.
Well, these are the proposed colors, right? This is the palette that you're talking about? Or, I
The
think, the samples you brought
the samples that we brought are the colors,
are the
yes.
proposed colors, okay. Well,
And unless you have some
I've got,
some recommendation or requests, or, but we didn't bring a full palette of other colors. If you know, you wanted to change it to a purple building or an orange building, or we did not bring a paint fan of
Really make it
colors.
stand out.
Let me ask you this, why did you come up with these colors? Why?
why or how?
Yeah, why and how?
So I think, you know, we started with the tower on the corner, the church tower on the corner, and the brick and the stone. And then, using that as kind of our starting point, we were looking for colors that would work well with it and be complementary. We definitely wanted a lighter color to include in this because of the play of shadow, the way it helps to lighten some of the areas like the courtyard that I talked about earlier. But we also felt that the contrast between that and something that's much darker and richer would also help with some of the issues that we've been talking about, breaking down the scale of the building, adding a degree of visual interest to the building. So, and then there are really three colors on the building aside from accent trim, and we have the gray, the wine red color, and the yellowish color, which I think we've been showing from the very beginning. So, for example, using the yellowish color next to the tower is a way of offsetting the tower and making the tower kind of stand out. So, you know, it was a matter of starting with what was historic on the site and kind of working out from there. Is this the only palette of colors that would work together? No, it's certainly not, but
Oh, they don't work together.
they don't work
You're
together.
talking about, what I see are several different tones of colors. You're working with blacks and grays, and then you're working with browns and creams, or that kind of, and the masonry is more of the black and gray, the roof is black, but then you're looking at the balconies, which are a beige or a taupe. We should go with one of the shingles are gray, I noticed, but the others have more of a brown tone, and
Well, I guess just to be clear, the masonry is not black or gray even. It's
I'm saying the rusticated stone.
the stone. The
That's
stone.
what you're
The stone. Yes, is looks like stone. I guess it has
Okay.
that stone-like color.
In your drawings,
Yeah.
we have, and these are, color is not correct on this, you show the existing building on the corner of Wilson and River as, in our drawing, it looks gray, is what I would say. It's the old Crane Furniture Building, it's gray.
It's a photograph, so
It's
yes.
truly
it's-
cream, I was by it today.
Okay.
So we don't exactly know how we're going, it's a cream color rusticated stone in that building. So
Okay,
it's.
so the stone we were trying to match is the stone that's on the church tower right now, at the base of the church tower. That's what we were trying to match,
And what tones do you think that is?
a grayish tone.
Somewhat. So that's gray, but the other, down at the opposite corner is cream, or,
Right, but like I said, where we start, the question was, how do we arrive at the color palette that we
Right.
did? And what I'm saying is that we started with the masonry work that's on the church itself, the combination of cut stone, rusticated stone, the brick that's there. That's what we started with. So I think our stone is actually intended to imitate the stone that's on the church tower there right now.
the brick that you have here is closer to that than the stone is, but it isn't in tones of, yeah, I would say that it doesn't match the tones of the grays at all. One other point I was just going, in visual aesthetics, if our charge was to make the building appear not as large as it is, in color aesthetics, as I believe, the warm color palettes advance towards a viewer, and the cool colors recede. And so what we're having then is a really strong advancement of color that is very visual, that people will see, which only makes the building appear larger. If we had a neutral, if you chose a neutral color palette, it seems that it's a calmer, it recedes more, and it wouldn't be as impactful visually as the bright push and pull of the yellow and the red. I feel that that's too much going on, and it only makes the building look large.
I guess a couple things. One, if you look at this, if you receive this via email, your computer screen would look different than my computer screen.
Okay,
And also, if your printer printed that versus my printer,
or this printer,
or that printer, it prints them, unfortunately, it prints them all slightly different. Here are the colors that we have chosen. I think that if we went around the room, everybody paints their home a different color.
Right.
Everybody, you hold up a paint fan that probably has 1,000 colors
Right.
Within it. Rather than debate here whether you would like it
I know, I know.
yellow,
It seems
cream,
impossible, right.
that I would suggest that you're a group, give us your thoughts or recommendation, and we will consider those. Because I think we could stand here all night long and say, is
And I-
that yellow, is that cream, is it
Believe me,
some
I don't
tone
want,
of white?
I didn't imply, I didn't want to do that, but there was we had no other forum
Sure.
than tonight to do this,
Right.
as far as suggesting, and I guess it's all an individual, but if we could come to a consensus as one, but I just had to state the way I felt.
I'd say for myself, I like the play of color on the building. I don't mind the dark and the lighter colors. I'm not sold on those colors necessarily. I think the yellow's probably too yellow.
It's called cream, but they say
Yeah.
it's yellow.
But I think you said before the meeting that it wasn't necessarily the same color that you used on the Greenfield project.
Correct.
And I like the colors on that project personally. So if you're familiar with that and you would agree, I guess as a group, we're gonna have a hard time
Yeah,
having 5 people agree on, you know,
On
an
a
exact color scheme, but maybe we could give a suggestion and head in a certain direction.
I am open to, if somebody
Yeah.
said that, because I believe that if you walk down the 4 sides of the Greenfields building, because it's aged, and the sun has hit it on different,
Ah,
the actual
different look.
different look, and even if you put the same board, cut it into 4 pieces and put it on the 4 different sides, and looked at this, how the sun hits it, it also looks as
Yeah.
a shade or 2 shades off. But again, if that's your recommendation, you love the colors of the Greenfields, do the colors of the Greenfields. We're open to considering those, but what I don't want to walk out of here with is we would like it green, we'd like it blue, and we'd like it
No,
red and
I
purple.
understand.
And
May I
then
ask-
then I do it white, and somebody comes back and said he didn't agree with any of us.
What color is the roof of the Greenfields building? Do you know? What's the shingle color? It seems to me that it's towards the brownish.
I thought it was more of it wasn't black, but it certainly wasn't brown when I looked at it, but.
Okay. This is the color of the roof.
It's a very popular color, because depending on what colors you put against it on the fascia and trim, some of those granules will pop out of it, such as in this case, you probably, if you stood here and looked at it, you'll see more of the white granules will pop, or the lighter tones will pop out of it, versus if you put that on a dark fascia and dark gutter, you wouldn't see those white speckles pop out of it as much, even though it's the same shingle.
Okay, is it basically a black underneath, or is it
No, I think the technical term or name of it is a weathered wood.
weathered wood? Okay.
Quick question for you. I wasn't at the cow meeting, I guess they call it.
Right.
You were. I think Tom was. But I did see it on TV twice. I seem to remember one of the council members, mentioning the color. And I believe she mentioned, they always come back with this big yellow color. And she said, maybe we can work that out. Is that the consensus? Because you worked with the council more than we do. What's the feeling you get from them? Again, are we going to be wasting our time talking about color? Or not?
It is,
Not that I could,
the,
that big a deal, but
to
I'd
be-
like to know how the council feels about it.
I don't recall from the cow that said that they told me cream or yellow, and when you look at that board, it's called cream, you're calling it yellow, somebody may call that yellow, but it could be also cream, but to be honest, we didn't pick the colors.
Okay,
We
good.
hired an architect who came to us and said, here's the color palette, and when we first looked at it, we kind of said, oh my goodness.
Well,
But
that's
then all
just
of a
something I
sudden it
picked
started
up on.
to-
I know it was brought up specifically, that it keeps coming back, this big yellow box. So what? If it's yellow, it can be gray for all I care.
I think
That was
to,
brought up.
just to emphasize it, I think, when some of the original plans came in and we were just looking at the massing, those were all rendered in yellow. And I think unfortunately, that's kind of stuck with everybody, because then that translated to the building itself. You have a lot of yellow with the original plans, I'm calling it yellow, but it's the cream. But, again, when you print these, right now, mine show yellow. But, that's more cream, just by looking at, what's represented. So I think if the Plan Commission wants to have, a different color, I mean, I think if, the Greenfield, example of colors is what you would prefer to see, I think that is something that, they could consider as part of the approval. I don't think that that's an unreasonable request, to say, what, we prefer to have that color palette as the color palette for the siding.
Is it unreasonable for me to ask if the city council saw that sample panel Monday or Tuesday night?
Yes, they did.
They had the availability. I don't know if everybody actually looked at it, but
Anybody get any feedback from the council on that, or no?
14 different pieces of feedback.
There you go.
I honestly think that they are looking for your opinion as to how you would suggest, and perhaps this is a suggestion, maybe not coming up with exactly that color, but to give advice on what would be more appealing in the colors that were selected. So for instance, I hear that cream color looks too yellow. Could we pick something in that family that leans more toward an off-white, a cream, than toward the yellow? So, and, similarly with the red color, if it, seems too red, and if you'd like it to tend more toward the
Yeah.
brown or a deeper red.
Because obviously that's all that we're allowed to do this evening, is talk about color, So,
Materials as well. I think that was a good question, Sue, asking about why those particular materials were selected to, and allow them to explain that it was in an effort to match the materials on the bell tower of the church.
Anything else? Any other discussion on the color palette? I mean, generally, I like it. I think that the two grays fight each other a little bit. One's cool, one's warm. So I think, to me, that's not significant for tonight in the sense that a project can continue to roll forward as we discuss final colors, if that's where we're at.
We can't do that, right?
We can put conditions in here where that can happen. Yeah,
Color pending?
why not?
just to get it going.
I mean, I'm not sure that Dave would have a big objection to come, if this project got approved and moved forward, to come back with some tweaking of the colors, I guess.
With direction.
Can I ask, if you do want to explore alternate colors, are you going to be looking for another color sample configuration or board like we have there? Are you going to want all new color elevations? How much color what do you need to determine what colors are going to work for this project?
My opinion is these colors work well. I'm talking about just very minor modifications in the shade that's already been selected. If the other commissioners have a different opinion, let's hear that. If you want green and brown, then we need to hear that tonight. I know that the Wilson Street elevation was all yellow at one time, or at least the center
Right.
portion, and you came back in an interim presentation and had made those adjustments. You did it at a city council meeting. You also adjusted the corners, I believe, to respond to some of the concerns that we had expressed initially.
Yes, and again, if that's something somebody wants to propose, that some area be changed from a siding to a shake, and the shake maybe, in one area gets changed from one color to another color, I'm open to talking about those, but what I don't want to do is leave here with 5 or 10 different options, or try something else and come back and see us in a couple of weeks.
The material of a siding or a shake is the same. It's the same material, it's just the look.
I'm sorry,
The material is the same, it's just a different look.
yeah, and the texture, as Don had
Yeah.
indicated, the texture of the wall will
And it's
read,
gonna be so high up, the normal person, normal eye's not gonna ever notice it.
What?
So,
What? What won't they notice?
The shingle
Siding or
siding.
shake for siding.
Did
I was
also-
just looking like at the Wilson Street elevation, like Tom was saying, you added some more of the, what do you want to call it, wine?
The Merlot?
That works for me. That was nice, but I was just wondering, I made a note here the other night behind the Wilson Street Tavern, which I don't go to anymore. Maybe we could add some Merlot behind that instead of that big yellow wall. That would break
Yeah.
that up.
Yeah,
That would make it a little bit nicer for me.
right, when you look at it from here, it's a big yellow space there between the
Yeah.
corner and the red.
And I was thinking the same along River Street behind, what is that?
O'Brien's?
O'Brien.
O'Brien's.
O'Brien's, behind O'Brien's.
It's not O'Brien's anymore.
Well,
O'Brien's.
River, I thought the same
Yeah.
thing
Add
along
some
River.
O'Brien's own the property.
Merlot
so-
there too.
And, yeah,
Just a clarification, on there it says it's Cinnabar.
I'm sorry, but, yeah.
So
we've-
Cinnabar, Merlot, I get different.
Red, we'll call it red.
Keep in mind
I
that,
don't like
keep in mind that the names,
Fire engine red, maybe you can have, I think we've got to be more specific.
keep in mind the names of the colors are going to change, because if you have one, from formerly having a paint store, if you have one color that's called Cinnabar made by Benjamin Moore, if you have it made by Pittsburgh Paints, it's gonna be whatever other color name. So the names are not necessarily exactly what the color is. Each manufacturer is gonna have a different name for the color, even if it's exact same shade.
Same shade, so you can call it Boone's Farm Raspberry.
Exactly.
Merlot,
Cold duck, yeah.
Well, but if we agree these are the colors, we can simply make that statement, and it will be those colors,
Correct.
regardless.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah, or if you would like to say that you would like to take that cream or yellow and reduce the yellow in it, but still have it as a cream, let us know that. And but I don't want to confuse it too much.
Right.
But
I think, back to Gene's point about the other two elevations that are all the yellow color, I thought about the same thing. The only reason I think I'm leaning towards what we're seeing here is because you're seeing those in elevation, which is not a true representation of what's gonna be built. They're way back from the street. So the lighter color kind of makes them go away. I mean, that probably is the logic that you were employing there, I'm guessing. On the River Street elevation, that because that's so far back, that maybe you kept it all yellow just to not draw attention to it, to draw the eye to it, as Sue said.
No, I think that's right. I think the other thing is to get the shadow play, with the light
okay.
colors back there, because it is going to be further back, so, I think the shadow is going to help to animate that, even though it's further recessed, that all tends to blur out a little bit, the further back
Right,
it is.
right.
And so I think the play between the light color and the shadows, we thought would help to animate that piece, even though it's in the background.
Right.
Help give it a kind of vitality that you might not have otherwise.
But I was thinking on River Street, as tall as that is,
Yep,
when you're coming down the hill here from, at the library,
Yep.
in front of McDonald's or whatever it is there, you're definitely gonna see that. and I
Yes, you are.
Break it up a little bit more.
yeah.
If I walk out of one of these facilities, that's not the first thing I'm gonna do is go look straight up in the air to see what people are doing on the balconies. I don't wanna know, But I thought it might break it up and actually come in from the west eastbound.
Yeah, I think, given the rationalization we use, I don't have any objection to what's being suggested though either. So I think it
So
could work
Gene-
either way.
So Gene, as an example, well, the elevation that Drew has up on the board there, are you suggesting just simply taking the top elevation, the same width of red,
Yeah, so.
okay, and drop it down into the lower elevation, or are you suggesting reducing it maybe a little from left to right?
Maybe see the picture right above it?
Yep,
Drop some of that straight down to reflect it here also.
in the same width?
Yeah, approximately, or whatever works for you. Just something to break it up.
And then
I'm not an architect. I'm not a painter. I know, I don't like that. But I think if you break it up, more people will like it.
are you thinking the same thing on the Wilson Street frontage as well?
Just in the furthest west side.
Wilson?
Because they did have it at the corner.
Yeah, right there behind the Wilson Street Tavern, if you
That's
could
it.
add a little bit of Merlot, yeah. Call it Merlot.
I don't think the tavern serves that.
Ripple. Call it Ripple, too.
And I would agree completely, especially along River Street was the one area that I would have objected to, and I think if you have something breaking that up, because it's not gonna fade into the background as you're coming across the river.
What do you guys think?
We're open to
You
that.
okay with that?
Yes.
Again,
I know.
if you would somebody make a motion and vote that one out so that we have consensus of adding.
Well, yeah, we got to get to that point, but it sounds like,
River Street and
unless I'm hearing a lot of disagreement, that we'd want to see some interchange of color on those two elevations, similar to what you've done on Wilson and State.
And interchange, not adding the light gray, but adding the Merlot.
Yeah, I don't know, I debated on that too.
I like the light
You know,
gray.
could you have done some light gray at the top?
Didn't mean to confuse you now.
You know, so maybe you're taking the horizontal siding up to a point in that color and then maybe light gray above, I don't know.
I like that.
I do like the way you've used the shingles on the
I do too.
the walls of the building, because that is one great, you know, way that you can break up the verticality. And it's a nice material. It kind of ties it back to the
That was,
historic nature of the
that
neighborhood.
was a change, wasn't it? Didn't we see that in our notes, that that was something you came back with, the shingles? That wasn't the original, was it?
I think.
Don says the shingles were always there.
Oh, they were. I'm sorry, I thought we saw that in our staff comments, that they came later.
Doesn't matter, I'm gonna ask you a question about shingles on the roof. I know we're not supposed to talk about the roof, that's fine. I'm just wondering, why are you going with asphalt? Why not consider like standing seam steel or something
Oh,
like
wouldn't
that?
that be lovely?
It would look nicer, wouldn't it? I don't know.
The couple of things, when you say standing seam metal roof, one is expense, but two, it's also very noisy. And a lot of people don't like hearing the pinging of the raindrops hitting a metal roof. Some people like it, they enjoy it, some people don't.
I just thought for longevity, it might be
There's lots of
the
buildings.
right way to go nowadays.
The reality is at a 412 slope and anywhere from 4 to 6 stories, that most people are never going to see that roof. You know, you can see it there even if, once that gets up above 8 feet. The roof you will see are the feature gables and corners. And the church tower. Is that the same material that's on the existing tower? Is it just a,
Oh, I'm sorry, on the existing tower?
on the existing church, is the roof a shingle?
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
It is?
The
Just
existing
a,
roof, yeah, the existing roof on the tower is a shingle.
three tab?
just a regular 3-tab?
It's a shingle now. It may not have been a shingle when the roof was originally constructed.
Right.
But it's a
Probably
shingle.
wasn't.
Shingle now.
Right.
And the idea is to replicate that as closely as possible. We still haven't gotten into the original building yet with the demolition to determine how much of the brick can be salvageable, but the intention is to salvage that brick on that original building as well as the limestone and use that if possible in the construction of the building. So if we can't, they're gonna have to replicate it as closely as possible to what that is.
Yeah, go back to your side view, because you had a fairly close-up view now. Here you're seeing what they're proposing. If we can't reuse this, or obviously there's not enough of that stone to do all the stonework you're talking about, you're gonna try to reuse that stone base and then continue with a material that matches as closely as possible?
Correct.
Okay. So that's why it's the lighter color. It's not the native limestone, I presume?
Right.
Okay. And the brick, I don't know, that's a different look to me.
Actually, we had a half a dozen different brick samples, and we found at least 5 different bricks on the church. And actually, not only the colors, but also the textures of the bricks. There's some that actually have these little notches or gashes in the brick. To 3 or 4 people, out of all of the bricks we looked at, this was the closest that we thought that it looked.
I like that brick a lot. you know, it almost has a kind of common brick quality to it, darker, but
Yeah.
I think it's gonna look nice.
And you're correct, and even in that elevation, you see there are some, I call it a burned, where the bricks are burned in that colored view. You see a couple that are
Yeah.
darker that
Dark.
jump out.
This is a good image to show, as soon as you get rid of the startup, thank you, what you're talking about with the window units. Not as pronounced as what you're proposing, but I think it's a nice carryover in the detail.
No, that's right. And one of the other details that you start to see here is that cut stone piece that I think when you go around the other elevation, that actually wraps around.
Wraps it around.
Yeah, this has all been changed. You can see that there used to be an opening here that's all been bricked in because the entry was originally up higher here. And I think this kind of carried around as a frame piece over it. So it's another kind of subtle detail on the tower that we're trying to pick up on and the way we handled the trim on the other facades.
Yeah, I thought you did a nice job with the tower. It's extended from what the original is. It's taller.
No.
Yes,
No,
it is.
no, it's-
Yes.
Slightly.
Yeah, it is taller.
In order to match the roof line. They brought
But you did a nice job with the proportions,
Thank you.
I think. I was just wondering, because we're talking about roof materials, a more historically accurate material there would not be a 3-tab shingle.
I'm sure it wasn't, yes.
And the-
asbestos slate
Yeah, or metal. And I think on the old Holy Cross, they have like the metal bulb, ridge corner or edging.
I think,
Something like that would look really nice on this.
right, and I think it's actually on the existing
copper.
tower. I think it's actually on the existing tower, too.
Oh, yeah. So you're gonna replicate that, basically?
Yeah, to frame the
Okay.
edge, so you understand what he's talking
Yeah,
about.
you'd have to pick that up on your plan. I don't know
Yes,
if you.
yes. yeah.
Okay, well, we're going on 10 o'clock. I think we want to move this along. Thank you, gentlemen. So, first thing we need to do, I think, is approve the findings. Now, if we go through the findings,
Before you do that, can you have some conversation among yourselves about maybe come to a consensus on what colors you would like?
Yeah,
And
okay, well, let's talk broadly. Are we broadly in agreement with the color scheme?
no.
Okay, so one no. I'm saying
Yeah,
complete change,
Oh, no.
No,
I
no,
want- I want what was discussed about toning down that.
tones,
yellow,
that's
the yellow.
different.
yeah.
So we're broadly in agreement with the color scheme.
On the plan, it it says that the red is Country Lane red. Right
And
there.
that's a Cinnabar, I mean.
It's not Cinnabar or Merlot.
I, again, I would go with the colors here versus a color on the screen or color on your print or my
Right,
print. But
okay.
that is but again, if you want to go lighter or darker or something like that,
Yeah.
let's always
This is-
refer to
These are
that.
the proposed colors.
Correct.
What we're seeing, not what we're reading, or what, gets printed
Right.
1,000 different colors
I
because of
would-
whatever printer you happen to have.
I would like it to go, at least looks there as yellow, I would like to see it more as a cream, a true cream.
can you find a color that you prefer in there, and maybe we can, if the commission wants, you can specify that color by name
There.
in the motion? Or as a condition as part of the motion?
Okay.
I mean, if you pick one out, I'll walk around and show it to the, individually to all,
They're
each
just all
commissioner.
very, very close in tone, but as long
Pick one.
just a slighter one. It's called a French white. And it's not white by any means.
Which one?
Joe, put it next to the red.
Which one it is, which one exactly?
The top
Top one?
I wouldn't,
It's pretty white.
yeah, that's gonna look white.
No, it won't, not, not if yellow.
Okay, we're going to be here all night.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
Too much for me.
No,
No, I don't like those.
I don't think we're going to be able to go through,
choose.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very difficult for us to do. I mean, this is kind of an art in the eye of the beholder to a certain extent.
Right.
And I think, I don't know that we want to get down to
can we
trying
just
to,
agree that the yellow shouldn't be as yellow?
Right.
Maybe it's
Yes.
a
Okay.
couple shades lighter.
That's fine, I would agree. with
lighter?
I'd be
You want a
careful.
lighter
Less
shade
yellow.
than
We
yellow.
don't want more yellow, we want it leaning more towards cream.
that. Or almond,
Yes.
right. But there again, that's relative,
For what,
isn't it?
for what it's worth, again, on the computer screen, it's gonna look different than what the sample is here. But if Drew, that's sailcloth,
It's showing sailcloth right now.
and a sailcloth is the color of the. so
Shake.
You can see that looks white to me, but that looks cream,
Cream there, yeah,
so.
okay.
What is sailcloth?
Sailcloth is-
Fascia?
The top
Is
one.
the fascia and the gutter.
Fascia, gutter, soffit?
Oh, okay.
Cover over the other, go down.
Not
I don't think it is.
You know, if we're okay with the grand scheme of things,
Yep.
come back at another time, let him come up with some colors. Instead of, we're gonna sit here and go through this.
No, we're not, no, we're not, it was just.
If they change the product line.
You could probably just leave the
the
recommendation
overall
to,
just tone it down.
to change the color to become more
I
cream
like red.
or something to
Oh,
that
you're
effect.
in.
Follow that color
I'll go the
scheme,
red
make it
better.
more cream, and we can just have them revisit that, just present it to you at some point in the future.
Okay.
I still say crimson and gold.
Well, that's,
There you go.
looks like crimson and gold.
I think what Scott said is right. I mean, again, it's extremely subjective, and we're looking at it in a fluorescent light, first of all, which is going to be completely different outside.
I
So
agree.
take the sample outside, let's come back at some point, and if everybody wants to stand around and pick a color, I'm sure Dave would be receptive to that. You know,
No,
it's not a,
oh, you mean if, when, pick one color.
well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about a variation in the shade, not
Right.
a different color scheme.
Yeah, what I would suggest is that you make a recommendation to approve the color scheme, subject to making the color more cream/almond color,
Okay.
and then just have him show you that at the future. That's the recommendation that would then terminate the design review, but they could just present it to you, so this is what we found that would work.
Great.
In what part of the motion would you adding some more color to, like the south elevation?
You can add that as a recommendation for the, addition of the Merlot color
Yeah.
onto the River and Wilson interior facades.
There you go.
Okay.
Just to get it moving.
But before that, we have to go through the findings.
Right.
Okay, let me ask a question of staff. The last time we went through the findings, and we didn't find in favor of all the findings. So does that automatically require a denial?
No, this is not like a zoning variance.
Okay.
So, where you have to find in favor of all the findings, you can find that you don't agree with all of the findings and still make a recommendation to approve it, subject to whatever conditions that you're.
Okay, so what is the real reason for going through the findings?
To show some justification as to why you made certain recommendations.
Okay,
Yeah, but remember, we have to show our work, because I don't want to be taken to school again for not showing our work.
well, we're going to show our work. Okay, so, finding number one, the project is consistent with applicable design guidelines. Staff comments are, the project balances the requirements of the zoning code as modified with the Plan Commission's multifamily design guidelines and standard design review criteria for commercial projects. Where possible, softening landscaping is provided, as are identity-giving characteristics compatible with its downtown context. Common open space is provided, including passive and active recreation amenities. We can go as far as saying we agree with that, and all vote in favor, and not have to discuss it any further.
You need a
Okay.
motion.
But before we do that, I think we need to walk through the guidelines, because what was pointed out at the committee of the whole meeting was that we were inconsistent. So we all voted in favor of this finding, but then when we came to the others, we didn't. And at least one of the councilmen found that inconsistent.
Well,
So,
they're individually noted.
that being said, the guidelines, I've highlighted some areas that I want to read and we can consider. Multifamily residential developments need to respect the scale and character of adjacent residential neighborhoods through attention to views, building scale, and orientation. Do we agree with that?
I agree with it.
So you think the building now is in scale and context with the neighborhood?
Oh, definitely.
Okay. Does everybody agree?
No,
'Cause
I don't think it is.
The design of a quality multifamily development must be evaluated in the context of surrounding neighborhood. Positioning building heights and masses according to the intensity of the adjacent use. Shorter buildings with smaller footprints should be sited near lower intensity uses, and taller, more massive buildings should be located near higher intensity uses and toward the center of the site. Now, this is a little different application because we're taking up the entire block and it's one building. But I think you can read into that this all goes back to the massing of the complex. If this was broken up into smaller buildings, it would definitely address some of the concerns we've had. So again, I personally think that this has bearing on our decision. Sue, you had mentioned earlier, 30% of the site area should be common space. That was pointed out. I don't know if this does, it's probably close.
Yeah, I was satisfied with that answer.
Okay. And then larger projects should provide both active and passive recreation areas. We talked about that. Washer and dryers are required to be placed in each individual dwelling unit.
Yes.
That was easy. Lighting is very important in creating safe multifamily projects. You showed adequate street lighting. You showed lighting in the courtyards. Certainly lighting along the retail portions of the building. So I think you probably meet that requirement. This one's an interesting one. Where buildings are located along major streets, provide a building setback of at least 1 foot for every 1 foot of building height. Downtown projects should have a more urban style with smaller setbacks. So rather ambiguous. I think it probably doesn't apply. Garage doors should not face streets. So, I mean, we're wanting to apply guidelines. We were told we should apply the guidelines, yet the guidelines are inconsistent
Right.
with this application. So how do we address that as a commission?
You can just note where, in your opinion, it meets the guidelines and where it doesn't,
Okay.
which you are doing.
And then under architecture, fundamentals of good architectural design must be followed. Building facades should be articulated by using color, arrangement, or change in materials to emphasize the facade elements. The planes of exterior walls should be varied in height, depth, or direction. Long facades should be designed with sufficient building articulation, reveals, and landscaping to avoid monotonous appearance. Now, to me, that directly speaks to what I've been speaking to in multiple meetings. That we basically have one large wall with end components. I agree the balconies do break that up, but I think it's very repetitive in the way that's done and could be applied much better. Avoid a repetitive use of single building configurations. reduce the visual scale of and give character and visual interest to a building and the individual units, vary building heights, limit the number, this says townhome units in a single building footprint, that wouldn't necessarily apply, using offsets in wall planes on all elevations, add interest to the roof line by using offsets, stepping the roof elements, and creating a variety of forms and treatments such as parapets, hips, gables, and dormers. I think done, again, very well on the Washington elevation, but not as well on the Wilson and State Street. So using contrasting materials as accents is encouraged. Some of that is applied. We've talked about it. So back to number one, the project is consistent with applicable design guidelines. I personally would say no for those reasons.
Since you went through them the way you did. You're right. But
We can't, yeah, we can't go back.
It'd be my opinion that it is consistent. It might not match perfectly, but I would say it's consistent.
Anybody else? Before we vote on it?
Once more, we have to answer all of these in the affirmative, correct?
No,
No.
this is not like a zoning variance, no.
No.
You know,
Okay.
if you can still make a you can, in theory, vote against the findings.
Right.
And still make a recommendation for the design review, subject to whatever conditions you
Said.
want. This is not like a zoning variance where if you vote down a finding, you automatically have to deny it. That's not the same kind of standard you have to follow.
Thank you.
And I would agree with Tom, it is somewhat subjective,
Yeah.
right?
oh yeah, they all.
Design is subjective. So Tom's a yes, Sue is a yes, is that what we're kind of hearing?
Yeah.
Jane?
I'm going to be yes in
Yes,
general.
I'm yes.
Yes.
I'm yes.
After all your reading, I'm inclined to say nay
Okay,
to that one.
so we would have 3 yeses and 2 nays, it would find in favor. So why don't we go ahead and have a motion for finding number 1?
I'll make a motion that we find in the affirmative for finding 1.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Goslin?
Aye.
Harms, absent. Joseph?
A nay.
Lalonde?
No.
Peterson?
Yes.
And Schneider?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, the project conforms to the comprehensive plan and specifically the land use, urban design, and environment elements. I don't have those sections with me, so I don't know if we want to go to those areas and talk specifically about what's included in each of those components. I did read through them. I think environment is really not relevant. Environment elements, really talking about protecting the environment, the Fox River.
Well, you didn't read the staff's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
The project would conform to several land use goals as being integrated into downtown Batavia, providing a mix of land uses, including needed rental, multifamily residences through quality development in an infill setting that can be efficiently served by city resources. The project would conform to urban design goals by designing all street-facing building elevations with a consistent presence, incorporating a design at the Washington-Wilson corner that provides a link to the historic Baptist church that it replaces, and providing significant landscape material in areas designed for landscaping.
Without going through each of the sections of the comprehensive plan, we feel that it meets those goals.
Well, land use, to me, seems very appropriate without looking at it specifically. I'm not sure what's in the urban design, I don't recall.
I read that one meeting we talked about, and it was, I drew, right, I brought a copy of the comprehensive plan. We read it about, at that time, we didn't think it did, but I think now.
Okay, well, the reason I'm bringing it up because I think it was a split vote, and I think we found against this finding, didn't we?
We did.
So I want to,
It's in the minutes.
I voted in favor of it, but there were three
There were three
commissioners who
noes and two
voted
ayes.
no.
Right.
So,
Here, it's in the minutes,
I
right
know, I
here.
have it written down.
right, didn't it fail
It failed.
2-3?
Yes.
So I was a yes. Gene, you were a yes? No. Okay. Are you a yes now?
Let me get a coin out.
I mean,
Apparently.
I don't know what would
apparently
be in there that we would vote against, I
Yeah,
guess.
apparently now I should vote aye on it.
Okay.
I would be a yes.
Sue?
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be an aye.
All right. So let's vote on finding number 2. We have a motion.
Also move that we approve motion number, I'm sorry,
Finding.
findings number 2.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Goslin,
Aye.
Harms absent, Joseph,
Aye.
Lalonde,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Schneider.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Number 3, the project is consistent with all applicable provisions of the zoning code as modified by the plan development overlay. Finding, the project as designed is consistent with all applicable provisions of the zoning code and provisions as modified by the approved plan development. Didn't I just read that?
It's late.
But the staff comments are identical to the finding. So here's one that was a little tricky for us. I don't remember how we finally voted.
We voted all in favor last.
Okay, because what happened was we voted against the recommendation of the zoning change, but the city council reversed that.
Reverse that.
So now the zoning is in place for this project. Okay, so are we all ready to vote in favor? Okay, motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Goslin,
Aye.
Harms absent, Joseph,
Aye.
Lalonde,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Schneider.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, number 4, the project is compatible, little Freudian slip, compatible with the adjacent and nearby development. And the staff comments, the project as designed and approved by the plan development overlay is compatible with adjacent and nearby uses. The project has received Historic Preservation Commission approval of a certificate of appropriateness.
I got voted down last time.
We voted against it, I think, primarily because we were against the mass of this project.
Right. Yeah,
And
it's
we wanted to
compatible with
reduce the
adjacent nearby
scale.
uses. Mhm.
But that's not the case any longer.
Well, you could still say it was, but
We were told to play nice.
just because you're allowed to build it this tall doesn't mean you have to build it this tall. But that's just one component. Compatibility in other areas would be the use. So the mixed use, I think, is very compatible.
Right.
It's very appropriate for this site. I do have an issue with the scale on this one, as I did before. But I could see how what you're saying, Gene, since city council has basically directed us not to
Not the judge.
address the scale of the building.
Right, it would be my opinion that the actual design certainly is not incompatible.
Right.
And sure, mixed use, all of that.
And I personally addressed the scale issues in finding number 1, so I could find in favor of number 4. Everybody else, okay?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second, and roll call, please.
Goslin,
Aye.
Harms absent, Joseph,
Aye.
Lalonde,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Schneider.
Aye.
Okay, 5th and final, the project design provides for safe and efficient provision of public services The project would increase the amount of public parking in the downtown, reduce the deficit of all parking in the vicinity. City utilities and emergency services can serve the proposed development, and adjacent streets would not be overburdened with increased pedestrian or vehicle traffic.
Well, we've seen the study.
But again, we've been told that experts have ruled that there won't be traffic issues, there won't be parking issues. So based on that parameter, I think this is an easy yes for me.
Yes. So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Goslin,
Aye.
Harms absent. Joseph,
Nay.
Lalonde,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Schneider.
Aye.
Motion carried.
So all motions carried. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, now the fun part. Okay, so staff reminds the commission that its action on design review is final. Unless it's appealed. So I'm not sure what that statement means, but it was written, so I read it. Any action is subject to appeal. But we can, we've been advised to make a motion for approval with conditions if we have issues with certain aspects of the project, as opposed to a flat-out denial. I don't think there's a benefit to a continuation. Dave has already indicated he's not willing to make any substantive changes as we had discussed at length. So unless,
But some of the minor changes we talked about, you agreed to do.
well, and we can still put conditions on the approval, then it's up to city council to decide whether they want to.
Well, if I may, if you put conditions on here, on the recommendation, and the developer is okay with that, then the design review ends. We're done. It doesn't go back to council. If they have issues with it, then they, the appeal is still pending.
That's why I asked Dave, and he nodded yes, so that means that we're good to go, that we're all friends now, right?
And that's why I would suggest if you wanted to take the changes, kind of one by one, I can either agree or disagree with you on that change, so at least by the time we're done tonight, we'll know which ones I've agreed to and which ones I haven't agreed to.
Might be an issue. Okay, that's a nice way to do it.
And if I may, just to summarize what I've heard so far, the changes, the downspouts to match the color of the adjacent trim, to add more red color, red siding on the Wilson and River Street internal sides, to tone down the cream color to be less yellow, more cream/almond color.
Right.
We did have some discussion about the State Street side, but I don't think we had any conclusion about that. And those are the main things that I heard that you wanted changes on.
Correct, and I think to clarify on the Wilson Street side, it's the center, but it's the westerly recess.
Correct,
Right,
right,
right.
right. Yeah, that's why I said the internal,
Yeah, the set-
Right.
the internal facade of it.
All right, could you read those again?
Downspouts to match the color of the adjacent trim.
Okay.
Add more red color on the Wilson and River Street internal sides. And to tone down the cream color to be less yellow and more of a cream/almond color.
Is it appropriate, Scott, to add one for the edge treatment on the gable or on the ridges of the bell tower roof? Because we didn't show that, but I think it's something that's been asked, so.
Sure.
Okay, well, let's start with, and I have a few others that I'll pose to you and my fellow commissioners. Downspouts to match the trim.
I would agree to the edge treatment, the downspouts, the toning down the yellow, and adding the red. So,
I wanted to ask each one individually.
okay.
All right, it's late.
Trying to move it along.
Yeah, and then the edging on the bell tower.
Yes.
Okay, so do we want to entertain, as part of this, a condition that looks at additional material change on any of the facades? Before I even ask Dave.
I don't know enough about it to make a recommendation. That's your.
Well, I talked about it,
You know,
so
you talked about it.
I talked about it at length in multiple meetings. Everyone knows where I stand on it. But, you know, if I'm fighting an uphill battle and 4 out of 5 are gonna say, I'm fine with it the way it is, then we're not gonna pursue it further. There's just no point. But if you're with me and feel strongly that there needs to be a change in the elevations that we're seeing,
Oh, it's the elevation. I thought you were saying the materials.
well, the material on the elevation, so there's a material change, I talked about more masonry or a different panel, which goes along with the change in the interplay of the planes of the facade of the building, which Dave has already made very clear he's not willing to do. I would be wanting to place those conditions on this approval.
And while I might prefer some of those things, I wouldn't make it as a condition.
No, wouldn't either.
Well, it's not gonna happen
I
if
think
we
it's
don't.
not gonna
If you don't make it
happen,
as a condition, there's no chance of it happening.
Correct.
It's not-
So if you all are fine with that, then let's move on. So what we see is what we get. Okay?
Yeah, I think I'm okay with it.
Any thought about less gables?
I don't think we can talk about that. I really don't.
Well, we can do whatever we want. As far as talking about it, city council can decide that they don't agree.
And it
with
would be my opinion, I don't have any objection. I'm not really qualified to design a building. I've got no objection to what they've got up there.
I think it's like you say, it's a losing battle. I just don't think they would even consider it, so.
Right.
Okay, but it's not a cost prohibitive request. It would actually save money if we eliminated some of the smaller gables. And before I, again, ask him to even consider it, he would want to go back to his architect and entertain a different way of addressing, you know, multiple smaller gables along the 2 primary facades.
If I can add a couple comments to that, we actually looked at a couple elevations, and I think we may have even presented some of those to staff where we eliminated, where we had eliminated a couple of the gables, and we concluded, and I think I'm going to put words in maybe in the staff's mouth, so feel free to jump in if you disagree. It almost looked like something was forgotten on the elevation when the gables were taken off. And then I'll add one other comment. You had pointed out in one of your slides, Tom, that on the Dodson Street project where we have 1 or 2 balconies without those gable roofs, it turns out that those 2 units are least desired units, and people don't like them mainly because there's no covered balcony. And they don't like to sit out there in the summer days, and especially the clientele is, again, younger. They'll sit out there all day long, but majority is the older. They don't like to sit in the sun. So that hindsight's 20/20. People have always asked, why didn't we have the roofs on the Dotson, those 2 end balconies? So our preference is.
It's also rain protection. They're sitting out there
Right.
during the rain.
Yeah, I was talking about corner balconies from a massing perspective.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
think-
thought you were talking about covered
Me
balconies.
too.
Yeah, we talked about gables. You said about changing
Gables,
gables.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that you
Remove
uncover
gables.
them.
Oh.
I'm just saying that you do a different roof form there.
Oh,
You know, how on Dodson, you just basically took the roof and flipped it up so that it broke the plane in the elevation. That way you don't have as many gables. You did it along the 3rd Street facade very effectively, I thought. But it sounds like the balance of the commissioners are not interested in entertaining that, like what they see, so let's move on.
Part of my reluctance as well would be, I don't know what they're gonna replace it with. I don't know
Right.
how that's gonna look.
Right.
I've got no objection
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I think you put the trust in the hands of the architect to make, good decisions in that regard, but let's not belabor it. Sounds like we're moving away from
Right.
it. I think that was all of my points. So it sounds like you would be agreeable to the downspout matching, add some Merlot on the two inside elevations at Wilson and River, toning down of the yellow color, and adding the edge roof trim on the ridges of the bell tower.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know that we should describe it as the Merlot color, but as the color presented, the red color presented.
The red color presented.
That's fine, yes.
Yeah.
And then the balconies, are you guys okay with exposed lumber on the underside of the balconies?
No, I'm not. I'd rather have it.
Again,
addressed to-
Dodson had something covering it. It was hard to tell from down below, but it looked like a wood slat. It couldn't be closed because it was open above. It
Yeah,
needed to
so
drain.
Because that, again, it's over a retail, that even though there's an opening, the roof above it, the porches have a roofing material membrane on them with a wood deck, sleeper slabs.
Oh, you do?
And then on the underside, it has a ceiling, but again, that's because if you notice, the retail bumped out at that location, and that retail portion had to be weatherproof, so there's a deck drain on that.
Well, there I understand, but even the above balconies, you could see the underside and you had them covered. Were those weatherproofed above also?
Yes, yeah,
Would you not consider that here?
we would not.
And because it's cost prohibitive?
It's a maintenance issue.
Okay. So what color would you paint the lumber on the underside?
What we've done on other buildings is we paint as Don referred to them, the structural members are the same as the trim around the balance of it.
So in this case, whatever that color is.
Oyster shell.
Oyster shell. Okay. Well, I think that's a good choice. I wouldn't want the yellow. It's too bright, and I think, dirt, et cetera, is going to be running down those from the balcony above. So,
Right.
I would say that color or even a little darker. Are you all okay with that, though?
Yeah.
And then the Trex material, the decking material, is that usually a darker, or is that just the gray?
It's usually I'm going to call it a darker brown.
Okay. Is that what you use typically?
Yeah.
The top of that usually weathers, but the underside wouldn't because it's not exposed to the sun, so that'll stay brown.
Correct.
Okay. All right, do we need to make that a condition?
Okay, yes.
We do? Okay, so paint the exposed lumber at the balconies,
The underside, yeah.
to match the trim, which is oyster shell. Is that what you said, Dave?
Yes.
I think just leaving it to match the trim is sufficient, because again.
Okay,
And could
goes
you
with a
refer to
different
that as
brand,
structural?
It's gonna be,
okay.
Could you refer to that as the structural framing?
Okay, so are we ready to make a motion?
Have we covered them all, Scott? Have we covered all?
Well, I think I want
think so.
someone to read these again.
Oh, Scott had a
sure,
list.
yeah. So I have downspouts to match color of the adjacent trim, to add more red color on the Wilson and River Street internal frontage, facades. Tone down the cream color to be less yellow, more cream/almond color. Trim treatment on edges of bell tower roof to be added, and to paint exposed structural lumber on balconies to match trim.
Okay, all right, good.
Okay, we need a motion for design approval with those conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Roll call.
Goslin,
Aye.
Harms absent, Joseph,
Aye.
Lalonde,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and Schneider.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Great. Hey, thank you. I thought we were going to be here later, so I'm actually happy.
Later,
Oh.
later.
Well, I thought it was going to take a long time.
It did.
3.5 hours, I guess, is enough.
What was last night's meeting?
Okay. Dave, thank you again for bringing all the additional materials and information. It was helpful. And I'm going to my agenda. Any other business?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Not from staff.
No, not from staff, but from Commissioner. I don't know if I was reading it or if I heard it, about the gas station property, that there was
The one
a,
across the street?
kitty corner from, or across the street, right?
Yeah.
That there was a developer that was interested in that, in building apartments there. That is true?
We had an inquiry about it, but we have not had any formal submittals. It was just an initial inquiry, just like anything else.
All right, then I heard that the Campana building, which is in Batavia, right?
Correct.
They're looking at doing apartments there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We had the initial land use review of that by the city council, committee of the whole, but we have not had a formal submittal for the zoning. Presumably, they're going to need some type of zoning relief for a couple of different things, so that would end up coming to you as a public hearing at some point.
Is height going to be one of them?
They're not proposing any external changes to the building other than some of the window changes for some of the apartment units, but they're not going to add on to the building.
Oh, no, they're
Change
just,
the skin appreciably.
they're just going to use that building, huh? Just the Campana building?
Yep.
They would do extensive tuck pointing and
Yes.
rehabilitation of it.
There's
Okay.
issues with the facade right now, but
Okay.
they would not change the appearance of it. In fact, that's pretty strictly governed by, since it's on the National Register, that's pretty strictly governed by
okay.
the state, as well as our Historic Preservation Commission, too.
Our next meeting's the 17th. I'm out of town. I know that we had a continuance of,
The sign,
It's
the court, the Supreme Court sign regulator.
we do have the continuation of the public hearing for the.
yeah, so I won't be here for that.
As well as design review for the Dunkin' Donuts.
Dunkin' Donuts,
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And also some zoning map amendments.
yes.
But if you get me something on that, I might be able to look at it and send comments in. I am interested to see what he does with the landscaping on the back of that wall, since it's such a narrow planting area. But I did look at it going by today, and I do think he needs to address that.
Yeah, it's a shame that he didn't go with that brownish color. It's along Butterfield Road, they have that as they define the street and from the property, you know, and it's so nice looking in the tan color.
What part of Butterfield?
Near Arrowhead, is it the golf
By
club?
Wheaton?
Arrowhead.
Yeah, Wheaton along Wheaton there. Yeah, it's very nice.
Is the drive-through open?
It's the,
Actually,
Not yet,
Close, huh?
maybe next week. See.
yeah, no.
Gene had mentioned that we should probably have a special meeting just to talk about the process that we've been through. I think, and obviously, we talked about a joint meeting with city council at some point. I think
Right.
that would be well advised, that we avoid some of the missteps that maybe, at least we felt occurred with this project.
yes, that is a plan. We don't have a date yet set for that, but we are planning on doing that, yes.
Good, good.
Yeah, so we probably need to clear our docket to
And I think when
not
we
have
do
too
this,
many topics.
Absolutely.
we should discuss nothing but that.
Yes,
Right.
right.
Special meeting, double pay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't budget for that this year.
All right, seeing that it's almost 10:30, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I will so move that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.